Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. The Flash from My Hero Academia. Chapter 1. In the morning, Shizuoka City General Hospital. 10 days have passed since the Keeley Square incident, but the tragedy is still vivid. 79 people died and 85 were seriously injured, including 6 heroes who died and 13 heroes who were seriously injured. The bloody numbers keep popping up in our minds. This is the most serious villain's attack since Neon's code-named H incident 6 years ago. This can't help but make us have such a problem. Can really keep. Gotcha. The TV in the ward was directly turned off, and the reporter's voice and picture disappeared. Li Tian, don't listen to the nonsense of these unscrupulous media, your parents are real heroes. A woman holding a remote control said angrily to Li Tian, who was lying on the hospital bed. My aunt, I know. On the hospital bed, Li Tian forced a smile. I believe my parents are real heroes. Yeah, Yu Shanyu looked at the forced smile on Li Tian's face, and also thought of his sister and brother-in-law, and felt very uncomfortable. That's her only sister, that's all. Li Tian, Yu Shanyu was about to speak, when outside the window, the sound of distant explosions suddenly came, and at the same time, there was a rapid beeping sound from the bag Yu Shanyu put aside. Didi, this. Yu Shanyu's face changed slightly, and he subconsciously looked at Li Tian. Go, auntie, I'm fine by myself. Li Tian looked at his auntie and said with the corners of his mouth pulled. Then, my aunt will leave first, and my aunt will come to take you out of the hospital in the afternoon. Yu Shanyu and Li Tian said, and then left the hospital in a hurry. From the window of the ward, Li Tian looked at the back of his aunt's leaving, a look of confusion flashed in his eyes. Heroes, Li Tian murmured. He knows that his aunt's job is a professional heroes. It's absurd that heroes should be a job title, but that's the way the world is. Not just his aunt. Li Tian's parents are also professional heroes, but they have already sacrificed. That is, the Keeley Square incident that was broadcast on TV just 10 days ago. At that time, their family of 3 was playing in Keeley Plaza, when they were suddenly attacked by villains, and his parents rushed forward without saying a word, and died in the end. And Li Tian himself was also seriously injured because of this incident. Later, he couldn't accept the death of his parents and was hit. He was overly sad and finally died. That's right, Li Tian is dead. The person lying on the hospital bed now is a person who was reborn into this world for unknown reasons in the 21st century, the so-called time traveler. The moment his predecessor just died, he merged into this body and was reborn, inheriting all the memories of his predecessor. He can also be said to be Li Tian, but emotionally. Li Tian did not inherit the grief of losing his parents from his predecessor. As for his previous life, as early as 5 or 6 years ago, the pain that should have been painful was over. His forced smile is only because of the matter of time travel. This world is no stranger to the reborn Li Tian. In the previous life, Li Tian saw it from the internet, and saw the trajectory of this world from another high-latitude perspective. My Hero Academia. Li Tian lowered his head and murmured, shaking his head, time travel is not unacceptable. After all, the idea of parallel worlds has always been popular in the original world. In the past, Li Tian, a fantasist who was very popular in a certain Lu, hadn't seen it, and even fantasized about time traveling. At that time, he was thinking that maybe he could become a god after time traveling, but that's all. Yi Gong likes dragons after all. When he really traveled to the original fantasy world, Li Tian faintly collapsed. It is not easy to establish a complete and correct 3 views, but it is very easy to destroy it. Fortunately, Li Tian himself was born with a strong heart. It has been 10 days since he crossed over, and Li Tian has almost thought about it. As long as it comes, it will be safe. Existence is truth. Since he has appeared in the so-called fantasy world, then this is the real world. Li Tian shook his head and a wry smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and his godless eyes recovered a little bit of expression. From today onwards, I am Li Tian. As Li Tian, I will live in this world. After thinking about it, in fact, time travel is the same thing, but it is equivalent to changing cities or countries to continue living. However, it is not so easy to think about it. Now, Li Tian himself also understands that at best, he is only temporarily suppressing and forgetting, or is simply escaping. Li Tian turned his head and looked out of the window, the blue sky and white clouds outside the window. He couldn't see the place where the explosion just happened, but the sound should not be too far away, and the direction of the explosion should be the direction his aunt rushed to just now. Villains, Li Tian murmured, inheriting all the memories of his predecessor. Li Tian would naturally not be unfamiliar with the only family member in this world, but Li Tian was not too worried about him. Of course, it's not because Li Tian doesn't have any affection for his cheap aunt, it's just, well, part of the reason. But the more reason is that the heroes of his cheap little aunt Yu Shanyu is named, Mt. Lady. That is to say, he had seen characters appearing in anime in his previous life. Although he can't believe it, judging from the so-called plot, Mt. Lady shouldn't have any problems at least until All for One is arrested. By the way, the time now is. Li Tian pondered and began to think. The memory in his mind vaguely remembers that before the Keeley Square incident, his aunt had already made her debut. It has been nearly 10 months since she became a professional hero, and the Silt incident also happened about 9 months ago. Month time. So, All Might is about to pass one for all to Green Valley Izuku. Li Tian frowned slightly. In this era when about 80% of the world's population has quirks, he was originally one of the 20% quirkless, the same quirkless as the original owner Green Valley Izuku. And in this era, how many ways to make quirkless have quirks is unknown. Li Tian doesn't know, but there are only 2 shown in the anime, that is, one for all and all for one. But these 2 kinds, the current Li Tian doesn't have the ability to touch them. One for All Might has decided to pass it on to Green Valley Izuku. Li Tian has no confidence in replacing Green Valley Izuku's position in All Might's heart in the remaining few days. As for All for One, Li Tian doesn't want to get in touch with that deep dark. So, do you want to live in this world as quirkless? Li Tian frowned. In fact, even quirkless doesn't matter much in this world. 20% of the world's population doesn't have quirks, and among those 80%, at least half of them are slightly better than quirkless. Weak quirks, that is to say, quirkless are actually in the same position as 60% of the world's population. If you work hard enough, your achievements are not necessarily bad. But born in a world of superpowers, how could he be willing to be just an ordinary person? Even though Li Tian has never been exposed to superpowers in his past and present lives for nearly 35 years, he still dreams of becoming a possessor of superpowers. Could it be that I want to pray for my golden finger to arrive soon? Isn't time traveling and golden finger more suitable? Li Tian laughed and couldn't help but complain to himself. However, the moment Li Tian's voice fell, crackle, a golden thunderbolt struck Li Tian directly on the hospital bed from the window with lightning speed. Then, there was a thunderbolt from the blue sky, and a thunder roared from the clouds above the hospital. Downstairs of the hospital, countless vehicles screamed crazily because of the thunderbolt from the blue sky, and countless doctors, nurses and patients who were frightened by the thunderbolt were either in shock, or they were with their companions. Talk about the thunder that exploded. But, only Li Tian, who was hit by the golden thunder, was lying on the hospital bed and staring out the window in a daze, his eyes full of disbelief. The thunderbolt just now didn't hurt Li Tian, even the clothes on Li Tian's body, the bedding on the hospital bed, and other things in the ward, as if it wasn't thunder but a golden flash. Fleeting. But Li Tian is very clear that it is thunder. No, it should be said that it is a thunder carrying some mysterious power, a thunder that only Li Tian can see. Speed force. Li Tian looked at his hands in disbelief, or sensed the power in his body. The moment he was struck by the thunder, the name or brief introduction of that mysterious power appeared in his mind. Speed force, or speed force, is the source of all speed. As for the specific definition, this is the information that appeared in Li Tian's mind. However, Li Tian is not ignorant of the so-called speed force. At least he has seen Flash movies in his previous life. Speed force is not just the mysterious power that exists in American comics DC Flash comics, it is also the speed force of Flash and others, source of power for speed. Am I going to be a speedster? Li Tian was a little dizzy, it was too sudden. It's not Li Tian, he's short-sighted. Okay, Li Tian is just short-sighted, whether he was an ordinary person in his previous life or a quirkless in this life, Li Tian's knowledge in the field of superpowers is not short-sighted at all. But, speed force, speedy. Li Tian thought about the Flash movies he had seen in his previous life, such as running at supersonic speed, running faster than the speed of light, traveling through time, and restarting the universe. Compared with the Speed Force, the quirks in this world are completely weak. Okay. Li Tian couldn't hide the excitement on his face. In the afternoon, Mr. Sun is still selflessly dedicating light and heat, which is fortunate that it has just entered June. In front of Shizuoka General Hospital, Li Tian pulled a box and walked out of the hospital gate. Looking around, Li Tian looked at the familiar and unfamiliar streets in front of him full of traffic. A trace of hesitation flashed in his eyes, but then disappeared in his eyes, replaced by incomparable firmness. I want to live a decent life, on my head, ahem. From today on, he will live strong in this world. Squeak. There was a sound of brakes. Not far from Li Tian, a car stopped, and then a beautiful figure came down. It was Li Tian's aunt, Mt. Lady Yu Shanyu. Shaoshan, hurry up. Didn't you say you'd wait for me to go through the discharge procedures for you? Yu Shanyu took 2 steps forward, and blamed him. I can still do half of the hospital discharge procedures. Li Tian smiled and said softly, he still doesn't have to let people arrange everything. Yo-yo, our little Li Tian has grown up too. Yu Shanyu looked at Li Tian teasingly, reached out and took the luggage beside Li Tian, ready to load it into the car. Then look back. Alas. There was another person next to her car. What kind of person? Brother policeman, just stop for a moment and drive away immediately. You can see if you cannot issue a ticket. Yu Shanyu clasped his hands together and apologized to the traffic policeman standing next to her car with a bitter face. If you stop for a while, it's a stop. I don't know if you can't park at the entrance of the hospital. There are often ambulances coming and going at the entrance of the hospital. If it blocks the road of the hospital ambulance, if you delay this moment, it may cause delays in rescue. There will be lives lost because of you. The little big brother of the traffic policeman was writing the ticket, while preaching to Yu Shanyu righteously. Listening to the long speech, the corners of Yu Shanyu's mouth twitched twice, watching his car drive out 10 meters before and after, and the 2 wide and smooth hospital entrances and exits avenues. If this can block the way of the ambulance, it can only mean that the ambulance is about to drive to the wall. But fortunately, she is not wearing a hero's uniform now, she has just debuted. Oh no, Yu Shanyu, who has just become a professional hero for 10 months, has gained some fame, but she is not so big enough to be known otherwise, as a hero. If Yu Shanyu were to be recognized at this time, he would definitely be treated as a laughingstock by his peers. What else can I do? I can only accept the punishment. Well, Uncle Traffic Police. You can see if the ticket can be fined more, and the deduction point is unnecessary. Yu Shanyu blinked at the traffic policeman, begging pitifully and cutely. The corner of Li Tian's mouth twitched, looking at the cute auntie who was constantly acting cute. The old mouth stuck in his throat and he couldn't vomit. No, the traffic policeman refused to Yu Shanyu righteously, with anger showing in Yu Shanyu's eyes. Hey, I'm so young, but you, an old woman, call me uncle, so why not deduct all your points, why vent your anger? Thinking in his heart, the traffic policeman silently filled out the ticket in his hand, and the amount of the figure was reduced to the minimum, but the driver's license score reached the highest in the regulations. Sitting in the car, Li Tian sat in the co-pilot, looking at the scenery passing by the car window. The image advertisements of All Might on the buildings were eye-catching. Hearing the smug laughter in his ears, Li Tian's face was full of helplessness. Quack quack, Ben Guliang is really witty. He just managed to catch him with a little trick. How could a straight man of steel be the opponent of Ben Guliang? A block of fines, eyes full of pride. Li Tian glanced at Yu Shanyu, and couldn't help feeling helpless. Isn't it just a little less fine, and then the driver's license points deducted can be exempted with the hero's license? So happy. His little aunt. Everything is good, kind, brave, upright, beautiful, black-bellied cough cough, but a little obsessed with money. It's because of the quirks. Li Tian couldn't help sighing. He still had a vague impression that his little aunt had grown up with the quirks since she was a child, and the destructive power was astonishing, so she often needed to pay compensation. This kind of character. Even when he became a professional hero, at the very beginning, his little aunt was all because the professional heroes came in quickly and the money was enough to make her lose money. But Li Tian thought of the reports about his little aunt that he had seen in the past few days. It seemed that Quirks still had to pay a lot of money after completing the hero's activity because of the amazingly destructive quirks. Heroes. Li Tian was inexplicably emotional. To be honest, when Li Tian watched the anime My Hero Academia in his previous life, he always felt very awkward. The word, professional hero, completely became the shackles of those professional heroes. If it is done well, it is our job. If it is not done well, the people will complain. When fighting villains, you must also pay attention not to injure the enemy's life easily. Heroes also need humanitarian compensation for the damage caused after the war due to personal reasons. Every time I see this, Li Tian wants to complain crazily. This is completely exploiting professional heroes as public servants of the people. However, after coming to this world, Li Tian probably understood the reason. It's really, the salary is too high. Li Tian thought of the names of a series of heroes on the list of high taxpayers he saw. Leaving aside the hard-to-calculate taxes of the super-popular heroes All Might, let's just talk about Endeavor, who ranks second in the heroes list. Endeavor's ranking is not considered the top horse. But even so, Endeavor's tax payment exceeded 1 billion yuan last year. This is the tax payment, not the amount Endeavor received. Occupation heroes is a scary occupation with a low tax rate. The annual tax payment exceeds 1 billion yuan. How much money is earned this year? Thinking about it, Li Tian felt jealous. Li Tian rubbed his chin and thought about it. Even though he came to this My England world, Li Tian didn't think about becoming a professional hero in the first place. Prejudice from the previous life and quirkless are on the one hand, and on the other hand, Li Tian feels that the word profession in front of heroes is a bit offensive. Of course, Li Tian is not the paranoid heroes Killer Stain is. Of course he understands the necessity of professional heroes' existence. It is impossible to make all heroes selfless, but even so, Li Tian still finds it difficult to accept the words professional heroes. But now, I'll play as a heroes too. Li Tian thought about it. Of course he definitely didn't want to become a heroes because of such vulgar things as money. The important thing say things 3 times. In fact, the dream of the original body was to become a heroes, but it was a pity that he was quirkless, and his family never supported it. The original body almost gave up the dream of becoming a heroes and even secretly signed up half a month later. Heroes subject exam of Shangying High School, to bid farewell to my dream. Thinking about it now, Li Tian feels that since he has inherited the memories and emotions from his predecessor, it is also necessary to help him fulfill his dream. By the way, Li Tian had a serious face. He was almost moved by himself. Heroes community. Get out of the car, we're home. In front of an apartment building, Yu Shanyu stopped the car directly and said to Li Tian, who was a little dazed in the co-pilot. But it's not here. Li Tian was about to speak when he saw a scene that left him dumbfounded. Yu Shanyu, who just got off the car, suddenly became taller and bigger, and instantly swelled up and turned into a tall titan. Although Li Tian knew for a long time that his aunt had a quirks named Gigantic, this world is also a world with supernatural beings. But seeing this scene with his own eyes was such a shock to Li Tian, who lived in a world of extremely strict physical, chemical and biological laws in his previous life. Strange, why is my aunt becoming huge? Is there a villains? In addition to being shocked, Li Tian was also a little puzzled. Then, Li Tian felt that the car he was sitting on was picked up by the huge Yu Shanyu and moved sideways and straightened. Li Tian held back his old groan in his throat, silently looking at the ant who was shrinking outside the car. Female driver, absolutely female driver. Li Tian suddenly felt cold all over, feeling lucky that he was able to get home safely, then quickly unfastened his seat belt, opened the door and got out of the car. Let's go. Yu Shanyu pressed the car key from a distance, and the car rang twice before beckoning to Li Tian, motioning Li Tian to hurry up. Auntie, where is this? Li Tian stepped forward quickly, frowned and asked in a low voice as he looked around. Our family. Yu Shanyu replied directly without answering. You are only 14 years old now. How could you let you go home and live by yourself? Now you live with your aunt and me first. Li Tian was stunned, and lived with his aunt, but then Li Tian understood what his aunt meant. This is obviously because he is worried that he will go home by himself, think of his parents when he sees things, and be sad at home alone. Li Tian was a little speechless, although he inherited the memories of his whole body, but emotionally, he didn't have the pain of losing his parents like his predecessor. "Ah, what? Hurry up, this is the house my aunt just bought, you don't know it yet, let me show you the way first." Yu Shanyu, who had already reached the entrance of the corridor, turned around and shouted at Li Tian angrily. Although he really didn't want to keep up, but Li Tian looked at his thin arms and legs, and his unfamiliar surroundings. He just thought for a second, then trotted decisively to follow. "I'm coming. That's it. From now on, little Li Tian, you will live with your aunt. How about it? Are you happy?" Yu Shanyu stopped in front of the door of room 502, took out the key to open the door, and said to Li Tian with a smile. Ah, the corners of Li Tian's mouth twitched. Could he, no, dare he say he wasn't happy? Open, happy, Li Tian said reluctantly. It's good to be happy. Yu Shanyu didn't know whether he really didn't see whether Li Tian was forcing a smile or deliberately ignoring it. He pushed open the door and walked into the room directly. "Come in, your Wai sister has been preparing for your reception since the morning banquet. If it comes, it will be safe. What else can Li Tian do?" Follow up. "Sister Wai also lives here. Wait a minute, you said that Sister Wai started preparing for the banquet at noon." Li Tian stared wide-eyed and looked at Yu Shanyu in astonishment. "Of course, we're best partner, the best match." Yushin Yuzhang nodded his head as a matter of course, and then suddenly thought of something. His face changed instantly, he pushed open the door, and walked in quickly room. Li Tian also quickly followed. Once he entered the room, Li Tian's footsteps stopped, and a strange smell kept burrowing into his nostrils. "It seems, is something burnt?" Li Tian looked in the direction of the kitchen strangely. At this time, Yu Shanyu's face became ugly, obviously she finally remembered. "Nanli Wai," Yu Shanyu roared directly. Come, come, come." There were 3 crisp voices in a row, and then a lady with glasses dressed as a cook ran out from the direction of the kitchen. Her face that should have been white and tender was dark. There are also burn marks on the clothes. Little Li Tian, you're finally back." The moment she saw Yu Shanyu and Li Tian, the glasses girl burst into tears and rushed towards Yu Shanyu. The glasses girl who rushed over was captured by Yu Shanyu in an instant, and she was caught under her armpit, and asked with a dark face, "Say, what did you do?" No, what are you doing?" The glasses girl rolled her eyes, and froth faintly spit out from the corner of her mouth. "I just cook food." Looking at the scene in front of him, Li Tian helplessly raised his forehead. But he is not surprised. Basically every time he sees his aunt and Nanli Wai together, there will be such a scene for various reasons. Nanli Wai was his aunt's roommate when she was in Heroes University, and also a part-time girlfriend at the current Heroes firm's partner. Outside of Heroes' logistics or business fields, people will be very confused, so confused that they even lack common sense in life. For example, this time, there are 2 gas stoves, an electric rice cooker, and an induction cooker, so Nanli Wai set up several pots early, threw the ingredients and water into the pots to cook the soup, and put oil on the other side for vegetables. The rice is put into the pot, and the fish, shrimp and crab meat are boiled in one pot. It doesn't sound like much. If I were to describe it in detail, it would be: potatoes, carrots, onions and other ingredients are not peeled, put them into the water pot and cook. Put the oil in the vegetables without frying and cover them directly. Wash half of the rice in the rice cooker and then put them in the pot. Fish, shrimp and crab meat dishes are not processed directly, cook in one pot. The most important thing is that I can't remember at all. Turning off the fire. Every time I have to wait for the water to boil and the pot to turn black before turning off the fire in a hurry. Thinking about it, Li Tian felt speechless. How did such a person survive? Cooking. You said you were cooking. You burned the kitchen down. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Li Tian sat in the living room, listening to the voice from the kitchen. His face was full of helplessness towards his aunt. Having been classmates for 4 years, they knew Nanli Wai's personality very well, and even dared to let Nanli Wai's family prepare a big meal by herself. I'm afraid today, no, the kitchen at home will not be able to function normally for at least half a month. Forget it, let's order takeaway. Li Tian silently took out his mobile phone, then found the restaurant's phone number and ordered the meal. Finally, When the meals were delivered, Yu Shanyu finally finished teaching Nanli Wei about love and finished the first meal of moving into the new home. Then, send Li Tian to school. Li Tian he. Just out of the hospital in the morning, he was sent back to school in the afternoon. Sitting in the classroom after a long absence for several years, Li Tian stared at a pair of dead fish eyes, listening to the teacher's boring lecture, feeling that he wanted to die very badly. Although he returned to school, his predecessor was a quirkless, and his sense of presence in the classroom was very weak from a very early age. In addition, most of the original body's time was spent on training, so it was even more inconspicuous in the class. It is probably in a similar position to the protagonist, Victoria, at the beginning. Perhaps the only difference is that there is no Ka Zhang, a childhood sweetheart from the same class who loves deeply. After class, Li Tian lay down on the desk directly, listless and unlovable. Although a lot of knowledge is different because of the different worlds, Li Tian has perfectly inherited all the memories of his predecessor Shuiba, and Li Tian has become a Shuiba gloriously. It's all trivial. Mr. Li Tian, congratulations on your discharge from the hospital. An energetic voice came from Li Tian's ear. Lying on the desk, Li Tian turned his head and looked at the strange scene beside him floating in the midair, only to see the scene where the clothes were not visible. That's right, Li Tian greeted out of curiosity. Toru Hagakure, the invisible girl in the anime, has a childhood sweetheart relationship with Li Tian. Toru Hagakure was also bullied because of the invisible person when she was a child, and the original Li Tian is a descendant of heroes. It was his sense of justice that exploded, and he rushed to help. Then we got to know each other like this, and in the end elementary and junior high were not in the same class, but they were still Ohm's good friends. Mr. Li Tian, are you all right? Toru Hagakure looked at Li Tian, who was lying on the table with decadence written on his left face and decadent written on his right face, with a hint of worry in his eyes. I'm fine, I'm in good health, Li Tian said casually. Oh, Toru Hagakure nodded repeatedly, with a look of hesitation on his face, although no one could see it. She really wanted to ask Li Tian about the uncle-aunt. After all, she knew from the news that Li Tian's parents seemed to have died in that incident, but she didn't know how to ask or comfort Li Tian. For Toru Hagakure's entanglement, Li Tian didn't see it. After all, no one could see Toru Hagakure's face. Not. After a while, the class bell rang, and Toru Hagakure, who was struggling, hurried back to his class. This girl. Li Tian looked at the school uniform going away, and couldn't help laughing, although he couldn't see Toru Hagakure's face, but Li Tian could feel that hesitant look no matter how dull he was. For Toru Hagakure, Li Tian can be considered to have initially recognized his childhood sweetheart. However, in Li Tian's mind, he couldn't help thinking of Toru Hagakure's glove hero's costume after being admitted to hero in the future plot. He remembered that there was a million man in the heroic academy. Quirks were penetrating and could not be used on clothes, so every time the quirks were used up, the clothes would fall off. Later, his hero's costume was the clothes that the equipment manufacturing company made out of his hair fibers to carry quirks. Find time to remind her. Future heroes' costumes can be made from your own hair fibers. Li Tian muttered to himself. In other words, it is also a childhood sweetheart he agrees with. It is impossible to make Toru Hagakure the same as the original book, so let's fight like that. There is also the issue of special training. When watching anime in the previous life, Li Tian wanted to complain. How Toru Hagakure was admitted to the heroes department of Shangying High School in the original book, whether it is from the transparent quirks or pure physical strength or grades, Li Tian does not feel that his childhood sweetheart has passed the test. The ability of Shangying. The simplest example is Hitoshi Shinso from the general department. The transparent quirks are no better than the brainwashed quirks against robots. As far as the armor of the robot is concerned, it can't be hit by Yi Yin's small fists while standing still. Open it. And there are quite a few of them, such as Grape, who has been called out of the group all day long, and his attack power doesn't seem to be able to break through the robot's armor. Okay, if Grape's sticking to the robot with sticky balls counts as points, then what the hell is Kota Koji? Even if it is to summon a flock of birds, the beaks of a group of sparrows can peck open the robot's armor, or there is no can a prepared tiger, lion, and elephant be summoned to help with the exam. You must know that in addition to the two wonderful works of Green Valley Izuku and Bakugo in the original book, the other candidates who passed the exam all had points for killing enemies and rescue points. Li Tian just wanted to blow his brains out, and he didn't understand how Yi Yin, who was unarmed, killed that robot whose armor was several centimeters thick. After school in the afternoon, when I got home, my aunt Yushanyu and Nanli Wei hadn't come back yet. The daily work and rest of professional heroes must not be as regular as that of students. Taking out his mobile phone, Li Tian ordered dinner for 3 people, and before Yushanyu and Nanli Wei came back, he quickly ate it up. After eating and drinking enough, Li Tian finally began to think about the mysterious power speed force he had obtained. Although, as a time traveler, he has seen too many illusion works with plugins, Li Tian still finds it difficult to understand that when he travels to a world, he will bring a different kind of power as a gold finger. But in the final analysis, since he has obtained this power, whether it is the calculation of the gods, the fall of the gods or the conspiracy of the devil, Li Tian can't worry about this, and that when he has no self-protection power, and will get it at his fingertips, power is left unused. Even if there is a conspiracy in the future, if you want to resist, you will need strength after all. The words of Speed Force, I remember. Li Tian rested his chin in thought. For The Flash, Li Tian still has a little impression. Although the American drama The Flash hasn't even finished the first season, but as a light nerd in his previous life, even if he hasn't watched The Flash's movies and TV series, but for The Flash's ability, he still has some understanding, and he even searched for Speed Force on Dunyong. Speed Force, that is, Speed Force, in the setting of DC, is the source of all speeds. All people with Speed Force will become extremely fast people with super speed. They can easily move at super high speed, ignore gravity on the water surface and running on high walls, vibrating oneself to travel through matter, super fast thinking, fast recovery ability, and even the best of the fastest can travel through time and space to restart the universe. Li Tian counted the Flash's abilities that he could remember, all of which could be used as a reference for him to develop moves in the future. It's better to try it yourself than to say 1,000 words and 10,000 words. Li Tian rubbed his chin, looked out the window and muttered to himself. Because of the neon school system, it's actually not too late now. Although it's not a shameful thing to experiment with your own quirks, Li Tian still feels a bit awkward about experimenting in broad daylight. How about we wait until the evening? Li Tian murmured. On a somewhat remote street not far from the heroes' community, Li Tian was wearing a tracksuit and moving his hands and feet. Waiting for the dark to come out to test his ability is just a joke. This is the superpower he has been looking forward to for decades. If he hadn't used the Speed Force, Li Tian might not be able to stop the car while running. He couldn't bear it anymore. Standing at the intersection, Li Tian moved his hands and feet and made preparations. This was the first time in his life that he used superpowers, so he was naturally extremely excited. After Li Tian exhaled a long breath of foul air, he was fully prepared, straightened his expression, and looked at the street with few traffic and people. Swish! Li Tian stepped forward directly, sprinting and running quickly. It was okay at first. Li Tian, who was not very proficient in using the Speed Force for the first time, did not succeed in accelerating, but as Li Tian galloped, the speed force in his body seemed to be stimulated, eager to try. When Li Tian ran about 20 meters away, golden arcs began to flicker on Li Tian's body. Immediately afterwards, Li Tian's legs moved faster and faster, and in the blink of an eye, it was already blurred and unrecognizable, and Li Tian's whole body was completely surrounded by golden lightning. The speed of the whole person soared instantly, and afterimages were pulled out in an instant. Red and yellow lightning flashed rapidly behind Li Tian, and Li Tian galloped fast, pulling out a golden lightning that was invisible to the naked eye of ordinary people on the street. At this moment, Li Tian's eyes widened in the hurricane, as he was shocked by the completely different world in front of him. The speed force is not just to make the speedster run fast. The increase of the speed force to the speedster is not only the running speed, but the overall speed, movement, thinking and other all-round increases. Just like now, pedestrians talking and laughing on the side of the road, cars speeding on the road, falling flowers and leaves on both sides of the road, all of these are like turtle speed in the eyes of the speeding Li Tian. The dynamic vision has reached a terrifying level under the increase of the speed force. In Li Tian's eyes, the whole world seems to be slowed down by tens or hundreds of times. This speed definitely exceeds the speed of sound. Li Tian's eyes were full of excitement, and he ran with all his strength. The strong wind howled through the barrier of super speed force and blew on Li Tian's face. Li Tian's not-so-short hair followed suit the wind blows. Cool. The excitement on Li Tian's face was hard to hide, and there was absolutely no need to hide it. Ha! Li Tian let out a sigh, looking at a bus stop not far away with a lot of people. Li Tian looked at a man with a strange appearance. That is obviously a person who has been mutated by the alien quirks. Although the society has generally accepted the alien quirks, in the eyes of a small number of people, this mutation is still synonymous with monsters. Of course, this is not the point, and Li Tian didn't mean to discriminate against aliens. The point is that the man's hand was in the bag of a lady in front of him, and it could be seen that he was holding a wallet in his hand and was about to go out. Dig. Thief. Li Tian narrowed his eyes. To be honest, he has grown up so much. Apart from seeing villains make trouble in the memory of his predecessor, this is the first time he has seen other petty thefts. With a thought in his mind, Li Tian's feet faltered instantly, and he ran towards that platform. Facing Li Tian in speed force mode, the opponent obviously didn't have the strength to find Li Tian. After approaching, Li Tian didn't plan to take down the other party, or secretly put the wallet back afterwards, but quickly untied the shoelaces of the thief's sneakers, and then tied them together to tie a knot. After that, give it a little push. Then, on the bus platform, Tsubasa Ando squeezed into the crowd and looked straight ahead, as if waiting for the bus, but the palm hidden underneath was feeling the thickness of the wallet in the bag of a woman in front of her. As a professional thief, he has long practiced the special ability to know whether there is money or no money in the wallet by touching the wallet with one hand. Just because of the thickness of the wallet, if he didn't deliberately pack a wallet of newspapers if you pretend to be B, then the money inside is not a small amount. This is a big fat sheep. Ando Yi showed a faintly smug smile at the corner of his mouth. However, before he could be complacent for too long, just as he was about to close the net, an illusory figure seemed to flash in front of his eyes, and then he suddenly felt a strong Rikido pushing him forward. Come. What's going on? Ando Tsubasa suddenly panicked, and just wanted to take 2 steps back to relieve Rikido, but his feet froze and he couldn't move forward. Ah! Ando Tsubasa was full of panic, and fell straight backwards, and then, the wallet in his hand flew into the sky. Squeeze what? What's the matter with you? Everyone give way. Someone fell down. What's going on? Is there a villains? The moment Ando Tsubasa fell down, the people behind him suddenly became noisy. Fearing that the villains would attack them, they retreated quickly one by one, leaving a small circle of space in an instant. Slap. The wallet, which flew in the sky for a few seconds, fell freely and hit Tsubasa Ando's face, which fell to the ground. Hey, my wallet! The lady in front of Ando Tsubasa yelled in surprise the moment she saw the wallet. She could still recognize her wallet, and then she quickly reached into the bag and fumbled for it. The wallet was gone. Thief! He is a thief! Catch the thief! The lady yelled instantly. Thief! Isn't it villains? The surrounding people suddenly started whispering, and at the same time, they all breathed a sigh of relief. After all, such a big villain's attack happened just a few days ago, and their tense nerves have not yet relaxed. The lady whose purse was stolen quickly stepped forward and launched quirks to swing the bag at the thief frantically, shouting, "Catch the thief!" and "Catch the thief!" in a panic as she knocked back. As for the thief Ando Tsubasa, he swam frantically on the ground with his arms in his arms. He didn't even have time to pay attention to the tied shoelaces under his feet that caused him to fall, and when he heard the lady still shouting, "When catching a thief," the whole person was about to collapse. This is not enough for women's singles. Do you have to call someone to come to the rhythm of mixed gang fights? If you fight like this, something will happen. Shall we stop that girl? Looking at the scene in front of me, people around me couldn't bear to watch it. It was too miserable. Of course, what is worth mentioning here is the girl's quirks. Although I don't know what quirks they are, everyone can understand that the bag has edges and corners, swung it vigorously, and landed with holes. Is a very powerful quirks. Even Li Tian, who was watching the play from the sidelines, looked at the scene in front of him with a troubled expression, speechless. These days, being a thief is definitely a dangerous profession. After the incident, it didn't take long for the patrolling heroes to rush over and escort the thief Ando Tsubasa and the lady to the police station together. As for Li Tian, after watching the play, taking advantage of no one's attention, he used his speed force and disappeared in place in an instant. However, what Li Tian didn't notice was that at the moment of his appearance and disappearance, in the crowd of people waiting for the bus at the bus station, a blue light flashed in the eyes of a thin figure. Hic, Li Tian hiccuped, and walked out of the cafeteria with his stomach in his arms, with an unconcealable sense of satisfaction on his face. It feels so good to be full. Standing at the door of this cafeteria, Li Tian sighed with emotion. Hearing Li Tian's emotion, the manager of the store behind Li Tian almost burst into tears. So bullying. Where did this strange thing come from? Quirks has a big appetite, and even a strong man of 110 can't eat this student boy. The manager and the waiter of this store looked at Li Tian's back without tears, but they didn't know that Li Tian was wronged and distressed at this time. He was obviously running briskly just now, but a sudden sense of hunger and weakness surged up crazily. At that moment, Li Tian almost fainted. Who the hell knew that after he got the ability of the Speed Force, he even got the Flash's super big stomach? Fortunately, I found a cafeteria before I fainted from hunger. Li Tian rubbed his belly, the satisfaction on his face quietly disappeared, and bitterness crept up his cheeks. What should I do with this amount of food? Li Tian is quite distressed now. He is worried about continuing to use the Speed Force. How should he fill his stomach for the next meal? Because it is a quirks society now, all kinds of weird quirks are related, so most industries have already united in this respect. Whenever there is an owner of destructive quirks in an industry, as long as you are in that, if a store in the industry shows up once, I'm sorry, the whole industry will boycott it immediately. For example, it is a cafeteria and a big eater like Li Tian. As long as Li Tian has eaten in any cafeteria, basically all cafeterias in the country will not do Li Tian's business. Of course, ordinary restaurants are absolutely welcome. My current food intake is about 100 times that of the original one meal. Even if I only eat a simple meal of 500 yuan a meal, it must be at least 50,000 yuan now. 3 meals a day is 150,000 yuan. The year has to be. Li Tian said to himself and simply counted the amount of food he ate tonight. The more he counted, the more Li Tian felt his heart chill. This is not a superpower, it is clearly a money power. Li Tian couldn't help but go crazy. Didn't it say that the rich rely on technology and the poor rely on mutation? Why does he have to become a rich man to use the mutated superpower of a poor man? Heroes definitely become a professional heroes. Li Tian's eyes suddenly burst into flames. For Li Tian, only by becoming a professional heroes can he earn a lot of money, enough money for his meals. As for ways to make a lot of money by doing business or becoming a manga or manga porter, etc., the secrets of time travelers, etc., Li Tian can only hee. He wasn't a business genius in his previous life. How could he be able to make a lot of money by running a business? And he is only 15 years old now. Okay, he hasn't grown up yet, so he can do a shitty business. As for Wen Chaogong's manga porter route, that's even more useless. In his previous life, he was not the kind of person who could read thousands of volumes. The works he could remember were all online novels, and they were all full of sentences. This is not the country of his time. What should I do if the climate is not acclimatized? As for the manga porter route, Li Tian can think about it, but before that, Li Tian has to investigate whether there are any similar manga in this world after the appearance of superpowers, and then Li Tian feels that he still has to learn how to draw first. So, want to get rich, want to have a full meal, becoming a professional heroes is the best choice for Li Tian at this time. In order to be able to eat enough, to fight. Li Tian's eyes were extremely sharp at this moment, and his will was as firm as iron, unshakable. After saying that, Li Tian was about to run home and ask his aunt to help with the recent meal expenses, but Li Tian stood at the door of the store, looking at the unfamiliar street in front of him. Hollow down pointing triangle, I came from that side. Meow meow. I used to patronize the Speed Force test, and I always ran there just because I saw it pleasing to the eye, and after I was so hungry, I even wandered around for a long time without even looking at the road, before I found a cafeteria to have a full meal. As for the route, Who is so hungry and crazy and still remembers that kind of thing? The wind was blowing loudly. Li Tian, standing on the street, looked up at the sky. His face was somber, his handsome appearance and his vicissitudes of life made passers-by look sideways, but no one could have imagined this at that time. The distress of this vicissitudes of life turned out to be. How should he go home? Could it be that I called my aunt and asked her to pick me up? Li Tian looked at the signboard of the cafeteria behind him. This place is easy to find, but it's really embarrassing to get lost. Even Li Tian could imagine the scene where his black-bellied aunt transformed into a titan tens of meters high, shaking the whole city with laughter. No, definitely don't call my aunt. Li Tian muttered to himself. He would rather throw this person to a stranger than to his own aunt. Li Tian's eyes lit up, and he has a solution. Ask for directions. He can pretend that it's the first time he came to this city, and then ask a stranger for the address of the hero's community. Crouching on the street, Li Tian drew circles on the ground, depressed. Who can tell him that this hero's community is actually built by a large national real estate company? There are 8 heroes communities in this city alone. Who knows whether he lives in ABCD or EFGH area? Oh, I don't know what area of heroes it is. Even if I take a taxi, it's impossible to find the place. Why don't you call Sister Wai? Sister Wai should know which hero's community and which district it is in. Li Tian scratched his chin and thought about it. A second later, Li Tian shook his head decisively. How could Sister Wai know? Let's call my aunt. Li Tian silently reached out and fumbled in his pocket, and then Li Tian, Omega D Omega, where's my phone? Feeling his 2 shriveled pockets, Li Tian silently looked up at the sky. He remembered that before going out, he was so excited that he didn't hold the mobile phone that was casually placed on the coffee table. It seems, this old man is not a serious mobile phone addict. Li Tian's face was full of joy. Congratulations, ass. Backquote. The corners of Li Tian's mouth twitched wildly. Is this God playing with him? Scud boy, I think you need help. Suddenly a voice sounded from behind Li Tian. Huh, Li Tian was taken aback, then his face changed slightly. A Scud boy. What's the meaning? Does anyone know about his speed force? Li Tian quickly followed the voice and turned around to look over. Then, puff, a mouthful of hot blood almost sprayed Li Tian all over. Sorry. A skinny figure hurriedly wiped the corners of his mouth and apologized to Li Tian. But Li Tian looked at the scrawny figure in front of him at this moment, but his whole body was sluggish. 2 golden bangs drooping on both sides of the cheeks, and a fat sportswear on a thin body that is as thin as a bone. The deep-set eye sockets make the eyes look dark, only the blue pupils are shining strangely. Brilliance. All Might. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, it's All Might. This image, Li Tian has seen countless times in the anime of his previous life. It is absolutely impossible to admit it wrong. I'm so lost, I can actually meet All Might in a weak state. Li Tian couldn't help feeling a little flustered. The All Might that Li Tian saw in the anime in his previous life was definitely just the tip of the iceberg. Only after merging the memories of his previous life could he deeply understand the exaggerated significance of All Might to this country. Even if due to personal reasons, Li Tian is very dissatisfied with the country he was reborn into this life, but for All Might, although Li Tian is not a fan of European chefs, he still admires All Might. Flying boy. All Might looked at the stunned Li Tian strangely, and frowned involuntarily. All Might is no stranger to Li Tian's appearance. When he was a professional hero, many citizens who recognized his first reaction and derivation were exactly like this. Did he recognize me? Impossible. My current situation is still a secret. Even among professional heroes, few people know about it. How could this boy know? All Might shook his head, laughing and throwing his ridiculous thoughts out of his mind. Zombie. Li Tian took a step back with a trace of horror. So I was frightened. All Might instantly let go. Blood. I'm not some zombie. All Might explained solemnly, with blood spurting from his mouth. Forehead. Uncle, why don't you stop the bleeding first? The corners of Li Tian's mouth twitched as he looked at All Might, who was spouting blood and explaining seriously. Although Li Tian already knew about All Might's situation at this time, seeing a talking person in front of him suddenly vomit 3 caddies of blood, it was still difficult for Li Tian to get used to this weird painting style. Haha, it doesn't matter, this stopped immediately. Look, didn't it stop? All Might laughed and talked, the blood spurting from his mouth also stopped. Li Tian saw that the corner of his mouth was straight sobbing. However, despite this, at this moment, Li Tian's mind was spinning like a storm, with a tiny arc of lightning speed jumping. How did All Might talk to him? Li Tian thought quickly. Although he seemed to be in need on the street before, there were many people in need of help, and there were also a lot of heroes patrolling the downtown area. He didn't believe that All Might, even the shriveled version of All Might, would chat with people on the side of the road. All Might has never been stingy with helping citizens who ask for help in need, but how could All Might take the initiative to talk to Li Tian for Li Tian who didn't clearly express his need for help? Is it because there are not enough villains, or the villains are not vicious enough? Scud boy, Li Tian thought of what All Might called him just now. Did you see me using the speed force? Li Tian had some understanding. It was impossible for casual passers-by on the side of the road to strike up a conversation, but a young man with powerful quirks had the basis for All Might to strike up a conversation. But it's not enough. Li Tian's mind was running crazily, a faint golden lightning flashed in his mind, and Li Tian's brain power was amplified dozens of times in an instant, and the brainstorm broke out with all its strength. I just came out of the cafeteria after eating, that is, at least 2 hours after eating. I haven't used the speed force. All Might can only see me running with the speed force before. What else is missing? Li Tian murmured in his heart. Even though Li Tian has seen All Might countless times in anime in his previous life, Li Tian has never underestimated the importance of All Might in this world. It is impossible for a child with quirks to make All Might take the initiative to talk, or said, Li Tian's previous super speed is not strong enough. Unless I do something that All Might is interested in, like quirkless Green Valley Izuku rushing out to save Bakugo. Li Tian's eyes flashed a bright light. He thought about it. It's the thing at the bus stop. If he had obtained the speed force for a long time, then Li Tian might not be able to guess what it was, but as he just obtained the speed force today, the only thing that interested All Might was the incident at the bus stop. In other words, All Might saw what he did at the bus stop, so All Might would drop by to talk to him when he saw him on the street. This was probably the only reason Li Tian could think of. On the lively street, Li Tian and the shriveled version of All Might face to face. Young man, looking at you just now, it seems that you need help. Why didn't you ask the heroes for help? All Might smiled, pointing to the heroes Burst Spring and Violent Werewolf, who just passed by on patrol. 2 professional heroes said. Uncle Zombie, you are very strong. Li Tian didn't answer All Might, but said with meaning instead. Very strong. All Might was taken aback, and then quickly evaded. Haha, boy, look at me, it seems very strong there. Indeed, anyone can see the shriveled version of All Might is weak, especially the problem of vomiting blood at every turn, and it doesn't look like a strong one. When you called me just now, it was the Scud boy who called me first, right? Li Tian looked at All Might with a half smile. Yes, yes. All Might broke out in a cold sweat. As Lan Bowen, a professional hero, he probably already guessed what Li Tian wanted to say. Although it's a little embarrassing to say it, but the speed I run is not something that ordinary people can see, so uncle, you are definitely very strong. As for your appearance, Li Tian grinned slightly. This is the era of quirks, and whether you are strong or not is never a matter of appearance. It really is like that. All Might looked at Li Tian's confident expression and twitched the corners of his mouth slightly. It really was here that he showed his flaws. He never thought that one day, such a mistake would occur because of subconsciously calling someone's first impression name. But, haha, young man, you guessed wrong. I just saw you suddenly appear and then run and disappear. All Might said with a smile and waved his hands. Suddenly appeared, then ran and disappeared. Li Tian murmured, sure enough there was nothing wrong. That thing at the bus stop, All Might was there. Li Tian, who had just acquired the speed force for a few hours, didn't stop when using the speed force, but at other times, Li Tian always stopped in the alleys where no one noticed. Raising his eyebrows, Li Tian didn't mean to expose All Might, but continued, when you caught the thief, you were also at the bus stop. All Might was taken aback, and looked at Li Tian curiously. Young man, how do you know I'm here? Go and chat. This is not a place to chat. Li Tian shrugged his shoulders and walked to the side. He didn't want to talk about his abilities in public, even if he didn't care about his abilities being known. All Might paused, but curiosity still prevailed. In addition, his All Might muscle form time was almost used up today, and he couldn't perform Hero's activities, so he simply followed. In a small park not far away, Li Tian and All Might sat on a bench. "Young man, can you tell me?" All Might asked with a smile. "It's actually very simple." Li Tian nodded, then suddenly laughed, and said playfully, "Uncle Zombie, you may not know, but my quirks just awakened today, that is to say, today I am the first run for the first time. So, at the bus stop, that's the only time I might be seen popping up and then disappearing. So that's how it is." All Might couldn't help laughing, and shook his head. He didn't think of the reason why he lied casually and exposed more. "Wait, quirks who just woke up today?" All Might blinked, turned his head stiffly to look at Li Tian, and asked dryly, "Young man, may I ask how old you are this year?" "Me, I'm 15 years old." Li Tian didn't hide anything, and replied casually. "Quirks just awakened?" All Might asked. Li Tian nodded. 15. Awakening quirks. A daze flashed in All Might's eyes. Generally speaking, the awakening of quirks is before the age of 4, and it will be more difficult to awaken the quirks after the age of 4. But All Might is not ordinary people, he has access to watch secret research materials. According to the data, there are about 3,000 quirks awakened at the age of 5, about 500 quirks awakened at the age of 6, and only 3 awakened quirks at the age of 7 last year, and there has never been any awakening record. Also, the awakened quirks of children who awaken quirks after the age of 4 are usually very weak, and it is even difficult to master them. However, the quirks awakened at the age of 15, and the quirks are extremely powerful, and it does not seem difficult to manipulate. This is a special case. Still is. Li Tian looked at All Might, who kept his head down and whispered non-stop. The muscles on his face twitched uncontrollably, and deep in his heart he was crazily complaining. This special meow character is wrong. How could this be All Might? Definitely a Victorian teenager. Could it be possible? The brainstorm in Li Tian's mind roared crazily. He seemed to have suddenly discovered the real reason why All Might would pass one for all to Green Valley Izuku. This is a predestined inheritance. Oops. It took a long time for All Might to react suddenly, and instantly covered his mouth to stop his thoughts. Have you spent too much time with the Victorian boy? Have you been affected unconsciously? All Might couldn't help laughing dryly, looking at Li Tian beside him in embarrassment. Fortunately, All Might didn't know that Li Tian actually knew his true identity, otherwise, he might just puff out his chest and tuck in his stomach now, taking a leap of faith and leaving. Cough cough. All Might coughed twice, and straightened his face again. "Young man, you seemed to need help just now, did something happen?" "That's not true." Li Tian also coughed twice. How could he say such a shameful thing like being lost and unable to find his home? "That uncle, I want to ask you something. Is there a heroes community near the bus stop in the afternoon?" Near the bus stop, the heroes community. All Might pondered for a while. It seems to be there. I remember that the D area of the heroes community seems to be nearby. Okay. The corner of Li Tian's mouth twitched. Heroes District D, as long as you know the location, it will be much easier to find. "What, boy, are you going to Area D of the Heroes Complex?" All Might asked curiously. "Yeah." Li Tian nodded, rolled his eyes, and said directly, "I'm planning to go to my aunt's house, but I only know that she lives in the Heroes community nearby, but she lives in it is not very clear which area, and then I wandered around and came here. It turns out that you are lost, young man." All Might slammed his left hand with a dazed expression. The corner of Li Tian's mouth twitched. He explained like that, why can he still see that he is lost? "Along this road, about 7 or 8 intersections are the previous bus stops, then turn left for 4 intersections, turn right for 3 intersections, and then walk 5 intersections on the road on the left of a 3-way road. I saw the heroes community." All Might pointed Li Tian in the direction. So far away." Li Tian laughed dryly twice. No wonder why All Might knew he was lost. Not lost, how could it be impossible to wander here? Li Tian was ashamed. It looked like he ran a short distance when he was hungry and sleepy. At night, it was nearly 8 o'clock in the evening. When Li Tian returned home, his aunt Yu Shanyu and his partner Nanli Wai hadn't come back yet. "Is it on the night shift?" Li Tian guessed. Usually even professional heroes would go home at this time, but night is undoubtedly the best fig leaf for crimes, so heroes' night watch is also inevitable of. Having already had dinner outside, Li Tian went back to the room directly, pushed open the door of his own room, and slammed it heavily on his new bed. "Ah, I'm so exhausted," Li Tian groaned, lying on the pillow, looking weakly at the dark night sky outside the window, his eyes filled with exhaustion. On the first day after being discharged from the hospital, Li Tian experienced a series of things such as gaining superpowers, moving to a new home, going back to school, testing the speed force, playing with thieves, getting lost, meeting All Might, etc., which undoubtedly made Li Tian exhausted. Especially when using speed force for the first time, that kind of ultra-high-intensity exercise, if it weren't for speed force's ability to strengthen the body, Li Tian would not be able to run dozens of kilometers in one breath. I still have about 50,000 yuan of money left here, which is barely enough for a meal. How can I talk to my aunt about borrowing money? Li Tian turned around in distress and looked at the ceiling. What he worries about is not whether he can borrow the money, although his aunt is a bit black-bellied and greedy for money, but if Li Tian asks, and the reason is right, his aunt will definitely lend him money. Li Tian was just worried about how to open his mouth. After all, what he wanted to borrow was not a small amount, but at least 100,000 a day, until he could have enough income to support himself. No matter how Tian finds a way to make money, it will take 2 or 3 months. This is a large number involving tens of millions, which makes Li Tian feel embarrassed to speak. Li Tian, who was already tired, became more and more distressed the more he thought about it, and his eyelids became heavier and drowsy. By the way, if you cook by yourself, you should save a lot of money. This was the last thought in Li Tian's mind before falling asleep. Li Tian fell asleep here, but on the other side of the city, All Might, who was separated from Li Tian, couldn't sleep. The den in the All Might home. All Might looked at the investigation materials in his hand, his blue pupils glowing. Didi, the call is being connected. Beep. Matt uncle. An excited female voice came from the other end of the phone. Hearing this voice, All Might couldn't help showing a smile on his face, and said, "Melissa." "Matt uncle, you haven't seen Melissa for a long time." On the other end of the phone, Melissa shrugged her nose and said coquettishly, "Haha, there are a lot of neon things recently, but I will definitely go to my island to see Melissa during this year's My Expo." All Might laughed. "Really, Dad will be very happy when he finds out." "No, don't tell Dad for now, and give Dad a surprise." Melissa said excitedly, "Matt uncle, don't tell Dad yet." "Okay." "Oh, surprise. Well then." All Might nodded in agreement without much thought. "By the way, Melissa, where is David? I have something to do with him." "Father, he should still be in the lab right now, and he won't be able to come back until very late." "Is your business important, Matt uncle?" Melissa asked curiously. "It's not an important matter, I just want to investigate something with the help of my island's complete statistics." All Might said. "Investigate statistical data, let me help Matt uncle with this kind of thing," Melissa said confidently. Could it be?" All Might was surprised. "Well, I've already obtained the qualification of my island's trainee researcher. As long as I graduate from high school, I can officially participate in the research of my island." Melissa's voice came with a smile. "It's really amazing." All Might looked excited. "I remember that even David got the researcher qualification of my island when he was in college." "Hey, Dad got the official researcher qualification directly at that time. Compared to him, he's still a little better than me." Melissa gestured, leaving a little bit between her index finger and thumb. On the other side, although All Might couldn't see Melissa's hand gestures, she could still hear Melissa's smugness, and couldn't help laughing out loud. "Okay, Melissa, please help Uncle Matt to check my island's data curry. When a quirkless reaches the age of 14 or 15, there is no precedent or similar example that has not awakened quirks." All Might said. "Awakening quirks at the age of 14 or 15. How is that possible?" Melissa suddenly shouted in surprise. "Matt uncle, are you kidding me?" "Of course not." All Might shook his head. "This is a person I just discovered in Neon. After preliminary investigation, he did indeed awaken his quirks when he was 15 years old, and he is a very powerful quirks." "Very powerful quirks." Melissa was really shocked. Awakening quirks at the age of 15, and a very powerful quirks, is this possible? If it weren't for the fact that the person she was talking to was All Might, Melissa would have rushed to give him a lesson, and talk about the basic law of quirks awakening. I know, Mad Uncle, I will investigate it carefully. Melissa took a deep breath and calmed down a little, and said in a deep voice. Then I'll trouble you. All Might couldn't help but smile bitterly. Of course he could imagine Melissa's disbelief and inevitable curiosity. After hanging up the phone, All Might stared at the phone, and after a while, he showed a gratified smile. David. Melissa was raised by you very well. On the other side, Melissa, who hung up the phone, was just as All Might thought. Apart from being unbelievable, a strong curiosity that belonged to the thinking of teenagers and scientists inevitably surged up. Is there a case of awakening powerful quirks at the age of 14 or 15? Interesting. Melissa stared at the computer, eyes flickering with excitement, and began to search the huge database of My Island. Awakening powerful quirks at the age of 14 or 15 is undoubtedly very shocking. If there are straightforward case records in My Island, Melissa will not be unclear, so Melissa is sure that My Island does not have the same. At least there is no such case that can be found with Melissa's authority. Of course, Melissa didn't forget her big boss. She didn't have permission, but her old father did. However, Melissa just doesn't have any hope for the database of My Island. Otherwise, with her old father's status, she would at least hear some rumors about this kind of thing. Therefore, all she can do is to look for similar cases in the huge database, even if one of them has similar characteristics, and then conduct a comparative investigation. Therefore, this is destined to be a huge project, and it is also a huge project that Melissa is very interested in. After hanging up the phone, the joy on All Might's face gradually calmed down. Looking at the information about Li Tian in his hand, All Might's face gradually became serious. The quirkless gained powerful quirks, and All Might felt more like his old foes approach than the sudden awakening of quirks. I hope you're not, All Might murmured looking at the document in his hand. Early the next morning, the biological clock, no, it should be said that the breakfast bell woke Li Tian from sleep, and even Li Tian's bad habit of staying in bed could save Li Tian. Sure enough, even if you're not using the speed force, are those who should be hungry still hungry? Li Tian opened his eyes, looked at the ceiling helplessly, and put his hands on his stomach. Okay, I'll find you right away. Stuff to fill you up, stop barking shamefully. After speaking, Li Tian sucked in his own breath and flattened his stomach, and then laughed himself. Well, didn't you come back all night? Li Tian walked out of the room, looking at the quiet house, and muttered to himself, then walked towards the living room indifferently. The phone he put on the tea table yesterday was still there. Pick up the phone. Really? Li Tian looked at several missed calls in the middle of the night and a text message saying he couldn't go home and shrugged his shoulders, but Li Tian looked at the 1,000 yuan meal bill from his aunt, silently the look up, ceiling. This money should be barely enough for him to have an appetizer. After tidying up, he took his school bag and didn't check the time. Li Tian went out directly. Although he already knew that such a thing might happen, Li Tian still reluctantly found a nearby cafeteria, and then Li Tian walked out of the restaurant silently with a fresh 10,000 yuan. Looking at the 1/5 of the meal fee that was freshly received in his hand, Li Tian suddenly had a bold idea in his mind. Of course, the reason why an idea is called an idea is because he hasn't put it into action yet, and it's just left behind after a turn in his head. After all, no matter how you look at it, this kind of behavior that is similar to blackmail is really it's so embarrassing. It looks like I'm going to try to learn how to draw manga. Li Tian sighed silently. Compared to those novels with millions of words that are not guaranteed to be popular in this world, for Li Tian, those comics designed to save the world and superheroes such as American comics are more sure in this world. Let the world mix up. As for short-term meals, or, for the time being, become an all-round delivery guy. Li Tian couldn't help but fell into deep thought. On the way to school, after eating and drinking, Li Tian thought about ways to make money all the way, and finally decided to give up the idea of becoming a glorious delivery boy. As for the reason, Li Tian saw that he still had less than half of his small coffers left, and felt very happy. Although the Speed Force is a kind of superpower that basically ignores the basic laws of physics, Li Tian is also the kind of speeder that is produced and sold on its own. But even so, using the Speed Force still requires energy consumption. The more you use it, the more energy Li Tian will naturally need to provide. Therefore, for the sake of his own little money, Li Tian resolutely gave up his plan to become a glorious takeaway boy, in order not to let the Speed Force, a high-end superpower, be used for nothing. Woo! On the tram, Li Tian and Yi Yin sat together, watching the scenery outside the window through the glass of the tram. From a distance, the two of them could see Xiangying High School in the distance. As a high school standing at the top of the country, it occupies a very large area. The large area seen by the naked eye is almost all the various buildings of Xiangying High School. Chatting for a while, the two got off the tram and continued to walk towards Xiangying, surrounded by many peers who were also walking in the direction of Xiangying High School. One could tell at a glance that these, like Li Tian and Yi Yin, were also candidates for the entrance examination of Xiangying High School. As expected of Xiangying High School, there are so many candidates. Toru Hagakure looked at the turbulent flow of people around him, with a hint of worry in his tone. Li Tian, do you think I can really get into Xiangying? After all, Li Tian looked at Toru Hagakure at the side, and then turned his head decisively to look forward. Couldn't he see anything at all? Don't worry, Xiangying High School is the top heroes' high school in the country. How could it be possible to judge whether it can become a heroes purely by combat power, and quirks is very good, and will definitely become an excellent heroes in the future, so nothing to worry about. Li Tian cheered Toru Hagakure up with a warm smile. In fact, Li Tian didn't have much confidence in his heart. In the original book, only Izuku of Green Valley was admitted to hero by relying on his rescue points alone. Yi Yin, who was not much stronger than Gu Izuku, could not help but twitch slightly at the corner of his mouth. After all, his childhood sweetheart is too good. Or Green Valley Izuku without one for all is just too useless. Xiangying High School, a huge semicircular venue. Li Tian looked around casually. This circle. At least there are 2,000 or 3,000 candidates. Should it be said that it is a first-class high school in the country? This venue is really big enough, and the equipment is basically first class. Li Tian lay on the table, thinking casually. As for the speech on stage, for Li Tian, who had memorized the rules by heart and even knew the pitfalls clearly, it didn't matter whether he listened or not. However, when Li Tian thought that there were only 36 candidates who could pass the heroes exam, Li Tian couldn't help but click his tongue. Candidates here have gone through the screening of grades, and the result is that they have a chance of close to 1% to be admitted to the heroes subject. This is enough to show how hot heroes high school is. Mr. Li Tian, listen carefully. This is related to the upcoming exam. Beside Li Tian, Toru Hagakure reminded Li Tian in a low voice. Relax. Li Tian turned his head and looked at the school uniform floating in midair beside him, and said lazily, we have passed the written test of Xiangying High School, and it will probably be the field test for heroes later. For that kind of thing, you just need to wait for the test and do your best to become a heroes and the rest. Li Tian said, shrugging his shoulders, so, what the teacher said now is nonsense except for the basic rules. It doesn't matter whether you listen to it or not. After listening, there may be a trap set by Xiangying High School. On Li Tian's side, Toru Hagakure stared at Li Tian with wide-eyed surprise. Although I wanted to refute, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt that what Li Tian said made sense. Finally, he turned his head and continued to watch the commentary of heroes present mic on the podium with a serious face. With his head on his stomach, although he couldn't see Yi Yin's movements, Li Tian could still guess what Yi Yin was doing with years of tacit understanding. Involuntarily, Li Tian smiled, although sometimes listening to people's advice is a good thing, but being able to stick to one's own ideas is even more commendable. In the final analysis, the most important reason why Li Tian didn't attend the lecture was that Li Tian had already been very clear about the situation of this exam. But what Li Tian didn't notice at this time was, under his seat, a small red dot was blinking in the corner. Listener. Obviously, this is a listener set by Xiangying High School. Anyway, Xiangying High School is also a top high school that specializes in cultivating professional heroes, and it is impossible for candidates who are about to enter the school to decide on a random exam. From entering the venue? No, it should be from entering the school. The examination of Shangying High School is already in progress. At this time, in the monitoring room, a group of examiners who are professional Shangying teachers from Shangying High School are observing meticulously. And when the teacher was explaining the rules on the podium, and almost all the students below were listening carefully and dared not speak, Li Tian's unique words were undoubtedly heard by all the examiners. Is this candidate very smart? An examiner couldn't help laughing. It's just a little self-righteous. After all, even if you think about it, it is very important to understand the specific rules. Another examiner shook his head with a straight face. Haha, although that boy didn't listen carefully, but with the voice of Mike, even if you plug your ears, you can still hear everything. As soon as this remark came out, the examiner beside him immediately laughed. They have a deep understanding of the sound waves of their colleagues. In the exam explanation meeting, Li Tian lay on the table and watched with great interest the legendary, very useful, Ida, and the little angel of Green Valley with a stern look. To be honest, if he hadn't known it a long time ago, Li Tian wouldn't have believed that Izuku from Midori with a stern look would be the heir chosen by All Might. A young Victorian boy who hasn't experienced anything yet, he is definitely suffering. Li Tian looked at LVGU Izuku, who apologized flusteredly with a chuckle at the corner of his mouth. However, this is probably the best disguise. The current Green Valley Izuku, even if he is caught in front of all for one, I am afraid that people will not believe that this is the current one for all. The instructions will end shortly. It's a pity, Mr. Li Tian is in venue F, and I'm in venue C. Walking out of the venue, Toru Hagakure looked at the admission ticket in his hand with a regretful face. This is to prevent candidates from the same school from helping, so students from the same school are basically staggered. Li Tian scratched his head helplessly and said, "Did you really listen carefully?" Is that so? Toru Hagakure laughed dryly twice. She can't help it either. When President Mike was talking about this part on the stage, it happened to be when he was talking to Li Tian. She didn't have Li Tian's ability to focus on two things at the same time, chatting and listening at the same time. By the way, Li Tian suddenly thought of something, turned around and looked at Yi Yin and reminded him, the responsibility of heroes is not only to defeat villains, so this exam, it's not that simple to defeat the imaginary enemy robot. Oh, what do you mean? Yi Yin was slightly taken aback. Come on, I'll wait for you at the door after the exam. Li Tian and Yi Yin waved their hands, but he didn't say anything clearly in the end, he just reminded Yi Yin. Although Li Tian didn't know that Shangying High School was monitoring all the candidates, Li Tian could also imagine that they were definitely being watched all the time. If Yi Yin ended up deducting points from the reviewer Shangying because of his reminder, it would be a serious crime. At the gate of the briefing session, Li Tian and Yi Yin respectively took different buses to the examination room. And the words Li Tian said at the entrance of the venue were inevitably heard by the examiners in the monitoring room. Unanimously, a smile appeared on the corners of the mouths of all the examiners. This student has already seen through the purpose of the exam. Sitting on the bus, Li Tian looked at the scenery outside the window while chatting. The bus is not slow, but for Li Tian's speed, it is definitely not much faster than a turtle's speed, and on the bus, because of the upcoming exam, almost all the candidates are using various methods to calm down their mood, prepare for the next exam in the best condition. Before getting into the car, Li Tian probably glanced around, and saw a few acquaintances in this examination room. For example, the girl with vines and green hair in Heroes Class B, and Ojiro Mashirao with a tail and the skinny little grape in Class A. These few, in Li Tian's impression, were finally admitted to the Heroes subject. As for whether there are others, Li Tian is not very clear. After the bus drove for about 10 minutes, everyone came from the main campus of Shangying to a simulated town on the edge. Even Li Tian knew about this scene a long time ago, but he couldn't help being amazed when he saw the huge town that existed on the campus of Shangying High School. There are cities in the school. Even if Li Tian knows that the buildings in these towns are not real cities but the products of cutting corners, but students can enter them to take exams, it means that this is not a real tofu project. It's really rich. Shangying High School. Li Tian thought of the hundreds of robots in the examination room again, and couldn't help shaking his head and sighing. A group of examinees got off the bus, looked at the examination room they were about to enter outside the steel gate tens of meters high, and expressed their emotions. Similarly, apart from emotion, every candidate's heart ignited a fire of fighting spirit at the thought of being able to study in this kind of high school. It started. Li Tian looked at the steel gate that opened silently, and couldn't help laughing. The tens of meters high steel gate opened without a sound. Li Tian didn't believe it if it wasn't intentional. Then let's start. Stretching his hands and feet, Li Tian twisted his neck, and the lightning speed and force behind him instantly appeared and wrapped around Li Tian. Whoosh! Li Tian kicked his feet, and instantly rushed into the venue like an arrow from the string. At this time, the other examinees on the side looked at Li Tian's movements, and were all stunned for a while. Of course, there is no shortage of smart people in this world, nor is there a shortage of people who act decisively. Seeing Li Tian rushing into the venue and the opening of the gate, some people immediately understood, then hesitated for a moment and then quickly rushed towards the venue. When the candidates in other venues were standing at the door waiting for the teacher to announce the start, in the F examination room, because of Li Tian's leadership, several candidates in the F examination room rushed into the examination room, and as some people ran up, some lacked judgment or were indecisive. Candidates also rushed into the examination room one after another. And at this time, from the top of the observation tower in the distance of the examination room, the voice of Hero's mic, like a loudspeaker, came over, "Run up and run up. Why, no one will call you to start the actual combat, but the exam has already begun." The voice from the broadcast made the candidates in other examination rooms rush towards the examination room like wild horses running wild. As for Li Tian's F exam room, most of the candidates had already rushed into the exam room and started searching for those robots to score. But, in the monitoring room, none of the examiners who were paying attention to the examination room F paid attention to these candidates. Instead, they all stared dumbfounded at the golden lightning that shuttled through the examination room F. As soon as the speed force was activated, Li Tian rushed into the examination room at an extremely astonishing speed. Although at his speed, it took less than a few seconds to score enough points in the opening area under full bloom, but it took Li Tian a few seconds to rush to the second half of the examination room before starting to hunt the robot. It's too slow, it's too slow. Li Tian looked at the almost motionless robot in front of him, exclaimed excitedly, sprinted over and flew into the air, and his foot with terrifying rapidity and huge inertia directly brought it to a standstill. The robot kicked and flew out and smashed into another robot's body. It's so weak. Li Tian stopped in his tracks, looked at the two falling apart robots, frowned slightly and complained. After personal experience, Li Tian also discovered that the combat power of these so-called robots does not conform to the appearance image at all. The loose links of the joint armor seem to be glued together, and what looks like a steel shell with a thickness of a few centimeters turns out to be a little harder than a car running on the street. This kind of thing, as long as you don't be deceived by the appearance, and then aim at the weak point to defeat it, it's not too easy. Li Tian shook his head involuntarily. He knew why Toru Hagakure could pass this test in the original book. In addition to the bonus points for quirks and rescue points, even if this kind of robot picks up individual robot wreckage in Yi Yin's hands as a weapon, it can kill a dozen or 20 in a 10-minute sneak attack. Forget it, this kind of boring exam, let's make it up. Li Tian shook his head, and the speed force exploded again, and the terrifying rapidity spread out and rushed towards the surrounding robots. 1 point. 2 points, 5 points. Li Tian held a stick-like part picked up from the wreckage of the robot in his hand, and it exploded at a terrifying speed. Every time it appeared, a robot was scrapped, and he kept counting his own points. 99 points. 100th. It's all done. Li Tian stopped in his tracks, withdrew his speed force, glanced at the dozens of scrapped robots behind him, and through the parts he was holding on the ground, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. 100 points, this is already done. It's number 1. Then let's take a walk to see if anyone needs help, and then wait for Robot Zero to appear. Thinking, Li Tian turned and ran towards the other candidates behind him. But this time Li Tian didn't go all out to burst out with speed. As early as the first time he used the speed force, Li Tian discovered that after the full burst of the speed force, although Li Tian's speed was faster, it was not suitable for normal use in daily patrols. As for the reason, in the rapid mode of speed force, the world in Li Tian's eyes is almost still, so if Li Tian runs with all his strength, everyone on the street will be still, even if he sees the villains or criminals. As long as there is a gap of 1 second, Li Tian may ignore the past and not find it. For example, right now, Li Tian wants to see if anyone needs help, but if Li Tian bursts out at full speed, then everything stands still. Then it might happen that Li Tian saw a seemingly normal fight, but just after running for a second, the robot's fist hit the examinee's face. What's more, after Li Tian started running at full speed, the original 10-minute exam may turn into hundreds of minutes in Li Tian's time perception. All the robots are covered, so Li Tian will have to die of boredom. Of course, the most important reason is to help the candidates, help the candidates, help the candidates, the important fake, cough cough, I say the important thing 3 times, epsilon. Different from Li Tian, who seemed to be doing nothing at this time, all the teachers and examiners in Xiangying's monitoring room were all startled by the speed of Li Tian's eruption. Less than a minute has passed. I have already scored 100 points. This result is already 100% qualified. No, even the first place is very likely. And I deliberately chose the second half of the robots. This is so as not to affect the results of other candidates. Otherwise, at this terrifying speed, it would not be a big problem to clear the entire field in 10 minutes. Even the well-informed professional heroes' teachers were amazed one by one. Although the speed Li Tian erupted before was too fast to be seen by the naked eye, many of them watched through the monitors. Not to mention slow playback, but looking down from a high altitude, after zooming out, everyone can clearly see the figure of the golden lightning Li Tian running in the city. With their eyesight and knowledge, it is easy to analyze the speed that Li Tian broke out just now. As the average speed almost 300 meters per second. Li Tian boy. At this moment, the shriveled All Might is not looking at the monitor of his successor Green Valley Izuku, but on the monitor with Li Tian's picture on the ground. The azure blue pupils are shining again and again. Although I have seen Li Tian running before, but the 2 times I saw him in a shriveled state without strength, I could vaguely see the shadow of Li Tian running, but I didn't estimate Li Tian's speed. All Might, this speed is not much slower than yours. On the side of All Might, Mr. Principal whispered. Mr. Principal, who looks like a mouse, is said to be the only one in the world who has awakened quirks animals, but also intelligence-enhanced quirks. With his intelligence, it is natural to see at a glance that Li Tian's quirks are not the kind that simply increase speed, but provide controllable super speed, and are powerful quirks that are connected with comprehensive improvements in movement, eye, nerve response, etc. No, his speed should be faster than me at my peak. All Might shook his head and whispered. When Li Tian was moving to the peak at high speed, I noticed that he glanced at the shoes under his feet, and then the speed dropped, and he was probably not able to fully explode the speed because of the limitation of the shoes. The soles of the shoes caused by high-speed running can hardly withstand the high temperature of friction. Mr. Principal whispered with a smile, what a very good quirks. But, All Might, you seem to know this student. Mr. Principal turned his head and looked at All Might curiously. I met him once in the urban area. All Might whispered the whole story of his meeting with Li Tian to Mr. Principal. Smart mind, strong strength, and seems to have a heart of heroes. What a good seed. Mr. Principal shook his head, sighed for a while, then turned to look at the students in other monitors. However, in Mr. Principal's mind, Li Tian has already decided to enroll in Xiangying High School. All Might also nodded. There is one thing that he actually didn't explain clearly to Mr. Principal, that is his investigation about Li Tian. Awakening quirks at the age of 15, to All Might, the probability of a miracle is far less than that of his old rival All for One, so he took the initiative to investigate. But, All Might thought of the findings about Li Tian. Both parents are professional heroes and they died in rescue activities. The only remaining relative, Yu Shanyu, is also a new professional heroes. With such a family background, All Might couldn't help but feel ashamed of his recklessness. Li Tian didn't know anything about what the examiners and teachers in the monitoring room were talking about or All Might's shame. He was still wandering around the examination room, walking at a speed that was hard for the students to spot, saving a few people along the way, and leaving a section of his own. The urban legend of mysterious rescuer heroes in the F examination room. Li Tian put the girl student in his arms aside, leaving the girl with a bewildered face to leave at a speed invisible to the naked eye, and couldn't help sighing. As expected of the exam of Shangying High School, there are so many interesting quirks. For example, the girl that Li Tian put down just now, quirks is really interesting. There are all kinds of mushrooms everywhere. Even Li Tian felt that if he hadn't left quickly, mushrooms would have grown on him. On the way, Li Tian also saw a boy whose whole body could spin like a hammer drill, and another area was directly covered by thick fog, and Li Tian didn't even enter that area. It's almost time. Li Tian couldn't help muttering in his heart when he heard the reminder that Present Mike had 2 minutes left. 8 minutes had passed since the 10-minute exam, and 8 minutes was almost enough to get enough marks for the candidates who could pass the test. The rest of the time should be the turn of imaginary enemy number 0 to appear on the stage. I don't know if it's really time, or if the imaginary enemy number 0 can't hold back. As soon as Li Tian mentioned imaginary enemy number 0, there were bursts of violent roars from the street in the distance, and then a huge robot taller than the buildings in the examination room appeared in the eyes of all the candidates. Except for Li Tian, who had been mentally prepared for a long time, the other candidates were shocked when they saw the sudden appearance of the huge robot, and after noticing the model of the huge robot, they all turned their heads and ran away. At least a giant robot more than 100 meters high, with this exaggerated size, few candidates can still have the fighting spirit. In the introduction meeting at the beginning of the edition, Present Mike declared that he defeated the imaginary enemy number 0 with a score of 0. Even some candidates who were not frightened by the exaggerated size avoided the giant robot one after another. It really made me wait. Li Tian looked at the huge robot in the distance, with a flash of fighting spirit in his eyes. After experimenting with Speed Force, Li Tian knew that Speed Force simply increased his speed. As for strength, it didn't increase in the slightest. The only way to exert great power was to use the inertia at super high speed. But that kind of attack is really a lose-lose type. It's okay for an ordinary-sized robot imaginary enemy, but for the thickness of the armor of the 0 imaginary enemy, if Li Tian now rushes up, it will be a moth to the flame. I don't know if those tricks are useful to this big guy. Li Tian murmured as he looked at the imaginary enemy number 0 in the distance, his eyes full of fiery fighting intent. Thorn, what is he going to do? That person rushed towards the imaginary enemy with 0 points. Perhaps it was because Li Tian didn't break out the fastest speed at this time, or maybe it was because the length of running was elongated. Many candidates present saw the flashing golden light with their naked eyes, and then turned their heads to look at him in surprise. Go. Looking closer, it's really big. Li Tian stood at the foot of the 0 imaginary enemy, looking up at the 0 imaginary enemy. The comparison between the two is like a titan and an ant, and there is almost no comparison between them. Check it out first, Li Tian whispered to himself, and the super speed force suddenly activated. First it turned rapidly around the imaginary enemy number 0, and in a second, Li Tian searched around the imaginary enemy no nearby. Mama, are all the candidates in this examination room of good quality? At the moment the robot was activated, all of them escaped successfully. Li Tian complained speechlessly. Of course, Li Tian didn't mean to be sarcastic. After all, these candidates are basically middle school students. They are all untrained children. In the face of a monster like Robot 0, they subconsciously following the rules is not difficult to understand. Scoff. Li Tian braked and stopped at a position about 100 meters away from the giant robot, turned around and faced the huge imaginary enemy number 0 imaginary enemy. Going up, Li Tian snorted softly, and the speed force burst out at full speed, like lightning piercing the sky. In an instant, Li Tian crossed the 100 meters and appeared at the feet of the giant robot, facing 0 who was close at hand. No imaginary enemy, Li Tian did not stop, but with a hook on the corner of his mouth, Li Tian raised his right foot high and stepped directly on the robot's armor. Then his left foot followed quickly, defying the gravity of the earth, and ran straight up. Anti-gravity vertical super speed movement. The 10 days before the exam, Li Tian hadn't spent it in vain. For Li Tian, what the current speed force could and couldn't do, in these 10 days, Li Tian had tried countless times. Of course, all this is the blessing of the ability to hold money. Li Tian, strong face and smile.jpg. Above the head of imaginary enemy number 0, Li Tian's figure appeared flashingly. There was an open space above the imaginary enemy number Zero's huge head, and at this time, Li Tian was also looking at the large enough open space in front of him and nodded in satisfaction. The size is just right. Li Tian nodded in satisfaction, and then began to gallop around the open space. 1 lap, 2 laps, 3 laps. With the rapid running, the circle under Li Tian's feet gradually began to tilt. In the end, Li Tian actually ran sideways around the head of number. Like a halo of lightning. First step, complete. Li Tian, who used Newton's coffin board as a toy, showed a dignified face. So far, Li Tian has tried several times before going around the building, and success is not uncommon, but the next step is the real key to Li Tian. Extreme speed. Li Tian let out a low cry in his heart. He was shrouded by the super speed force and was running at super high speed. He changed direction instantly, his right hand suddenly stretched out, directly resting on the edge of the huge imaginary enemy Zero's chin, and then rushed up. Hold on to. Guillotine. Li Tian roared in his heart. The speed force under his feet suddenly exploded with all his strength, and the huge inertia brought by the terrifying speed instantly squeezed on the outstretched right hand. In an instant, a powerful force squeezed Li Tian's right hand, the cuff shattered inch by inch, the entire right hand was dyed red in an instant, and the skin seemed to be cracked piece by piece. Ka, ka, ka. The connection between the huge head and body of imaginary enemy number Zero kept making unbearable sounds. At this moment, Li Tian's legs were almost connected into one piece, and the speed force exploded with all its strength, and the shoes under Li Tian's feet had already started to emit white smoke. Li Tian endured waves of pain coming from his right hand, gritted his teeth and roared, "Give me, break it." Boom. With a crisp sound, the neck of imaginary enemy number Zero was snapped in an instant, the huge head turned on the same huge body, and Li Tian grabbed and pushed it up at an astonishing speed. Whoosh. At the moment when number Zero imaginary enemy's neck snapped, Li Tian's figure flashed, and he appeared on the building on the side of number Zero imaginary enemy in an instant. Clutching his bloody right hand, Li Tian looked at the imaginary enemy number Zero whose head was spinning like a spinning top at high speed, and electric sparks kept flickering from the neck, and the corner of his mouth hooked. Solve it, hiss, it hurts. Li Tian grinned and covered his blood-stained right arm, squatted on the edge of the building, tried to move his right arm, and a bone-piercing pain hit him instantly. Hiss, sure enough, the muscle is strained. Super speed force is to ensure that my body will not be broken, but it is too normal for the muscle to be broken by excessive force. It should be said that the bone is not broken. All right. Li Tian took a deep breath, quickly covered his right hand and said thankfully. For the current Li Tian, the speed and power are strong, but the weakness is also quite obvious, that is, the serious lack of attack power. Compared with the extremely exaggerated speed, the increase of attack power by the speed force is almost nothing. Even before Li Tian learned how to turn the speed force into lightning and throw it out, it can be said that he had no direct attack ability at all. Of course, Li Tian didn't count the inertial force punch that also died out. To be honest, after really experimenting with the speed force, Li Tian felt that the first time Barry Allen used inertial force to punch Iron Man, he was a real brave reckless fighter, swinging at Iron Man with that terrifying inertia. Fist, but a broken arm, it was simply luck against the sky or instinctively using the speed force to save him. Li Tian felt that if he punched the imaginary enemy number Zero like that, it would be no wonder that the whole fist didn't suffer from powder fractures. Anyway, before he learned how to use the speed force to protect his punches from being shocked to death by the shock force, Li Tian decided to kill him without using that trick. He is not the little angel of the Green Valley, who can swing his fist with tears in his eyes and enduring severe pain to kill 1,000 enemies and hurt 10,000 at the same time. On the rooftop of a high-rise building, Li Tian squatted here happily looking at his masterpiece, but on the other side, the entire examination room was already in a frying pan, and many candidates were stunned looking at the imaginary enemy number Zero who was beheaded in the distance. Crouching on top of a street lamp in the street, Ojiro Mashirao watched in astonishment as Robot Zero fell to the ground in the distance. That guy, is he really the same age as us? This strength is too strong. That guy is definitely a monster. With this kind of strength, there must be many beautiful girls around. Not far from the Zero robot, a small figure looked at him from the corner. Not far away, the head of Robot Zero was almost drooling with envy. The giant robot, which was so scary in size, was killed by someone, and it was killed by students of their same age. Many candidates were stunned by the scene in front of them. Of course, there are students who are shocked and astonished, and there are those who are dark and unwilling to accept the slander. A very small number of candidates were very dissatisfied with the scene where Li Tian killed the imaginary enemy number 0. In their hearts, facing this villains, everyone should run for their lives as frantically as they did. What kind of idiot is that? He even said that the robot got 0 points and ran away specially. He likes to show off ghosts. Of course, Li Tian is not clear about all of this, nor is he interested in it. Although there is a feeling of killing 1,000 enemies and losing 300, but the fighting methods are finally effective, but we have to find a way to reduce the damage caused, otherwise we will be like my aunt in the future, and I will have to pay a lot of money. It's over. Li Tian crouched on the edge of the roof, looking at the ruins of the imaginary enemy number 0 in front of him, and the machine head that turned into a spinning top and scurrying on the ground, moving his shoulders and talking to himself. The organs in the exam, the rampant troublemakers, and the huge imaginary enemy number 0 are completely scrapped. Thanks to his speedy physique, Li Tian's recovery and self-healing ability is frighteningly fast. For Li Tian, this kind of muscle strain, which requires at least 3 to 6 weeks of recuperation for ordinary people, may be healed in less than 10 minutes, full recovery. Li Tian looked at the right arm whose superficial wound had healed by itself, almost couldn't hold back the tears, so much food, it's not for nothing. He is too difficult. Since he showed that Quirks got the money from his aunt, his name at home has changed from the previous little Li Tian to the honorable big rice bucket. Now, with this speed of self-healing, who would dare to call him a big fool again? Quiz over. Accompanied by the loud voice of Present Mike, harsh sirens sounded in all the examination rooms at the same time, and all the moving robots stopped their activities. The candidates who were constantly hunting also stopped their hands, and many candidates even sat down directly. On the ground his face was full of exhaustion. In another examination room, with the sound of the siren, Izuku, who was covered in bruises, rolled his eyes and passed out directly. Just like the plot that Li Tian had seen before, the Victorian boy unleashed the terrifying power of One for All with all his strength in order to save the suppressed Uraraka Ochako. That kind of injury was so serious that Li Tian, who was grinning because of the muscle strain, would definitely feel ashamed when he saw it. In terms of self-harm ability, Li Tian is absolutely willing to call Green Valley Izuku the strongest. The exam is over. It's time to go home and wait for the news. But the first place is basically no difference. On the edge of the roof, Li Tian shook his hands and said to himself, his injury has almost recovered. However, just when Li Tian was about to activate his speed force to leave, he suddenly discovered that his shoes had been covered with scorched marks at some point, and more than half of the soles of his feet were exposed. Is it broken again? Even if you control the speed deliberately, using the speed force shoes is a big expense. Li Tian kicked the broken shoes aside with a helpless expression. He has a stack of worn-out shoes. He even ordered several pieces of clothes. It seems that when customizing heroes' clothing, you have to specify a pair of super wear-resistant shoes and clothes that won't catch fire. Muttering, Li Tian turned around and walked down the stairs slowly with bare feet building. Chapter 11. At the gate of Shangying High School, Li Tian stood barefoot on the spot, because most of the sleeve of his right hand was broken when exerting force. For the sake of beauty, Li Tian simply tore off the other sleeve, although, the image is still the same, it is not flattering. Ha. From a distance, Toru Hagakure saw Li Tian's sharp attire, laughed out loud, trotted all the way over, and said teasingly, "Mr. Li Tian, you have improved this time. You only lost your clothes. Up both sleeves. You're lucky, the imaginary enemy number 0 is not very strong." Li Tian shrugged and said helplessly. Ever since he accidentally broke out the limit speed in front of Yi Yin, causing Yi Yin to see him by accident, stepping on the Hot Wheels, and wearing a fire transformation flame gray clothes, this has become something he can't wipe away. The stain is gone. Yi Yin's face darkened in invisibility. What is luck? The number 0 imaginary enemy is not very strong. Thinking that he was facing her number 0 imaginary enemy in the examination room and couldn't even get close, Yi Yin was a little frustrated. How was the exam? Li Tian asked, looking at Yi Yin's clothes who were jumping a little. It should be pretty good. Yi Yin restrained his smile, and said after a deep groan, I don't know why, those imaginary enemy robots have turned a blind eye to me. Even if I went to their side and dismantled them, I won't fight back either, so I tore some more. Li Tian was a little taken aback, whether he hit back or cursed. Could it be? Li Tian looked at Toru Hagakure, who only had clothes, with weird eyes. Hey, I'm wearing clothes. Sensing Li Tian's strange gaze, Yi Yin understood instantly, and shouted in embarrassment. Then, a group of candidates who were either full of confidence, dejected or hesitant around them instantly caught sight of Li Tian and Toru Hagakure, and their eyes became strange. What do you mean by wearing clothes? You see which girls are invisible, they don't need to wear clothes when they say which. It makes sense, and it should be requested by some man. Li Tian's complexion turned dark instantly when the voices of discussion came from his ears, and Yi Yin's complexion instantly turned red when he was invisible. Whoosh! Li Tian hugged Yi Yin in an instant, and the super speed force was activated suddenly, a burst of sparks followed by lightning, and he disappeared with a whoosh. In the woods not far from Shangying High School, Li Tian and Yi Yin suddenly appeared here. Students nowadays are all dirty in their thinking. Li Tian stopped in his tracks and complained with a dark face, there is absolutely no one of that kind of student who can be admitted to Shangying. Ha ha! Yi Yin, who was still shy at first, laughed out loud after seeing Li Tian's big black face. What are you laughing at? Those people are talking about you. Li Tian gave Yi Yin an annoyed look, lowered his head and began to clean the soles of his feet. That's why he doesn't want to run barefoot. With super speed power, he is not worried that his bare feet will be worn out like shoes, but if he runs fast, he will get dirty, and it is different from the black soles of his feet that can be easily washed off the dust when he walks slowly. Bana Li Tian has experienced it himself. It's as if you haven't worn shoes and washed your feet for several years, it's hard to wash. Who told Mr. Li Tian to think wrongly first? Yi Yin also snorted softly. She knew the meaning of Li Tian's strange eyes just now. Although she does intend to fight like that in the future, she hasn't put it into action yet. The corner of Li Tian's mouth twitched. What else could he say? Could it be that he instinctively thought of it because he had seen your future fighting in anime? By the way, speaking of it, I've been thinking hard for a long time, and I finally came up with a battle suit design that suits you. Li Tian didn't even bother to clean the soles of his feet, so he quickly changed the subject. A battle suit design suitable for me. Yi Yin was taken aback. That's right. Li Tian nodded. The problem with the design of your battle suit is that there is no transparent material like your body. In that case, instead of using natural materials, use the fibers of your hair to make the battle suit. Will it be ready soon? Li Tian learned the idea of using hair fibers to make combat uniforms from Million of the Big Three. After Million appeared on the stage, he was very interested in the scene of Million's battle, and then he read the comics, only to find out that they used this method to round up the LB battle. Thinking about it now, Yi Yin fought like that for a full year. Compared to Million, he is simply raised by a stepmother, a real son. Using hair fibers to make a battle suit, that's right. Why didn't I think that I could use my same transparent hair to make a battle suit? Yi Yin murmured and thought. The more she thought about it, the more excited she became. Thank you so much, Mr. Li Tian. Yi Yin jumped excitedly towards Li Tian, onto the back of Li Tian who was rubbing her feet on the bark with super speed. Tangled for a long time. You come down first, let me clean my feet first. Yi Yin grabbed Li Tian's neck, unable to control his body balance, and shouted hastily. Ha ha, don't let go, I like you Li Tian the most. Yi Yin was very excited, he was impatient, and said what he had kept in his heart for many years. Then, the air became silent, and the almost deserted jungle was extremely quiet for an instant. Li Tian looked surprised, but it seemed to be expected. As for Yi Yin, after receiving the memories of his previous life and getting along with him these few days, he can probably guess the girl's mind. Only the kind of children from his previous life would not be able to find out, but Li Tian is not hungry yet. When it came to the point of attacking a junior high school girl, she didn't make it clear. Ah, Yi Yin seemed like a frightened little rabbit for a moment, and quickly jumped off Li Tian's back, without saying a word, covered his face and walked forward quickly. It's so embarrassing, so embarrassing, so embarrassing, you actually said it directly. Quote. This girl, Li Tian couldn't help laughing, looked at Yi Yin who was trotting all the way, turned around, and rubbed off the thick black ash on the bark of an uncle with great speed, then he turned around and followed Yi Yin. In other words, it shouldn't be a big sin for high school students to start dating. I am back. Pushing open the door, Li Tian returned home. I'm back, how was the exam? Yu Shanyu asked casually, half lying on the sofa with a lazy face, holding potato chips and watching the Dog Blood TV series. First place. Li Tian has long been familiar with Yu Shanyu's lazy appearance. His aunt has always believed in lying down and never sitting, and sitting and never standing, except when performing hero-s activities need to ensure the image, other times, there is never the slightest image. Number 1, it seems that your big rice bucket quirks is not useless. Yu Shanyu, who was lying on the sofa, couldn't help but tease. Speed Force, that's called Speed Force. Li Tian's face was as black as iron. Not only was he called a big idiot, but even Speed Force was jokingly called a big idiot quirks by Yu Shanyu. What angered Li Tian the most was that the dazed Nanli Wei really believed Yu Shanyu's nonsense, thinking that his quirks were some kind of big-hearted quirks. Hey, all your food now needs to be processed with quirks, how dare you say it's not quirks? Yu Shanyu turned around and looked at the annoyed Li Tian, and continued to tease with a smile. Li Tian opened his mouth, a little speechless, who made his appetite really speechless. Speaking of this, I have to mention quirks of Yu Shanyu's partner Nanli Wei. Unlike Yu Shanyu, who was a best friend, who enlarged himself to a gigantic size, Nansato Hana's quirks are the exact opposite of shrinking objects. To the greatest extent, Nanli Wei can shrink the objects touched by both hands by 100 times, and the quality is reduced by 100 times, and the upper limit of the reduced objects is comparable to a 30-story skyscraper, which is about 100*100*100 cubic meters. The only or fatal shortcoming is that the CD time is too long. Whether it is shrinking or recovering, Nanli Wei needs a rigid 2 seconds to activate quirks, which is completely unsuitable for fast-paced battles. That's why I chose to become logistical support heroes. Therefore, Li Tian's current meal at home is basically a big pot meal, that is, let Nanli Wei first reduce the ingredients by 100 times, and then cook them in one go, and gradually restore the volume so that he can eat enough at one time. Humph. With a cold snort, Li Tian ignored his black-bellied aunt, turned around and walked towards the kitchen. At home, he had already piled up ingredients that had shrunk 100 times like a mountain, and he only needed to wait for Nanli Wei to recover and start eating after he finished cooking. Yu Shanyu didn't continue to provoke Li Tian. As the only person in the family who could cook, Li Tian was in charge of their family's catering. If something went wrong, what if he just prepared some food that she didn't like? In the dining room, Li Tian took out rice from the cupboard and steamed it on top of it. Although it didn't look like much, it was the amount of steamed rice in a normal family, but it was condensed 100 times. As for the vegetables, meat and various seasonings, etc., after buying it, Li Tian cuts all of them and prepares them before handing them over to Nanli Wei for processing, so the ingredients that don't look much bigger than sesame seeds can be cooked normally up. Although the taste after the final recovery is a bit weird, for Li Tian now, being able to fill his stomach is the most important thing. Shangying's entrance exam has passed, and there is still about 1 more month to go before entering school. During this time, let's really start training. Li Tian turned on the Speed Force, and while cooking, he was thinking. In the past, because he was afraid of delaying the entrance examination, even though he obtained the Speed Force, Li Tian did not conduct any outrageous training or move development, and did not experiment with many ideas. Otherwise, he would not have only that simple moves. Now that the exam is over, and Li Tian is sure that he has the super fast self-healing ability of the Flash, he can start developing the Speed Force moves, and use the Speed Force to bring him dozens of times the ordinary people's learning the effect of exercise, the learning of in-depth knowledge and fighting, and the exercise of physical fitness have long been on the agenda. By the way, there is also Wen Chaogong's money-making plan, which needs to be launched as soon as possible. Thinking about it this way, I'll be really busy in the next few days. Li Tian sighed. However, compared to the previous life where he was doing nothing and drifting with the crowd, Li Tian still prefers the feeling of being busy and planned now. 0.15 seconds. Accompanied by Toru Hagakuri's clear and crisp shout, Li Tian stopped in his tracks, and the lightning of the super speed force gradually subsided and dissipated. 0.15 seconds for 100 meters, close to twice the speed of sound, is it about a 65 to 67 times increase? Li Tian calculated secretly in his heart, moved his wrist, and walked in the direction of Toru Hagakure. Without using speed force, Li Tian's fastest 100-meter speed is 10.06 seconds, which is close to 10 meters per second. After using speed force, it is about 660 to 670, if the error in performance are removed. The current speed force's increase in Li Tian's speed is equivalent to about 65 to 67 times. Of course, this is only the roughest calculation. 100 meters away, Yi Yin jumped up and ran towards Li Tian excitedly, shouting excitedly, "Li Tian, your speed has become much faster again." Since the last hero test, both Yi Yin and Li Tian tacitly did not mention the sentence that Yi Yin was about to burst out. However, in Yi Yin's mouth, the word, Jun, behind Li Tian has disappeared unconsciously, gone. It's okay. Li Tian smiled. If it wasn't for the fact that the training intensity couldn't keep up due to the severe wear of the shoes, otherwise he should have been able to break through Mach 2 by now. How's 2's training going? Li Tian asked with concern. Because his speed training needs to run all the time, he is not on the sidelines for Toru Hagakure's training. It has already achieved results. Hearing Li Tian ask about her training, Yi Yin also had a smug look on her face, although Li Tian couldn't see it. Look, Li Tian. Yi Yin stretched out her right hand to show Li Tian her training results. Li Tian looked at the past, and saw a little light in Yi Yin's arm, which could only be judged by Yi Yin's clothes, and the light gradually became brighter, that is, within 2 or 3 seconds, Yi Yin's right hand it was hard to look directly at it, and after 10 seconds, the light was dazzling, as if it was a second sun. Even Li Tian raised his hand to cover his sight at this moment, not daring to look directly at Yi Yin's right hand. Okay, it's time to stop, Li Tian said hastily. Call. Hearing Li Tian's voice, Yi Yin grinned, and slowly controlled the light on his right hand to gradually dim, and finally disappeared. How about it? It's amazing, Yi Yin said triumphantly. Excellent. Li Tian stretched out his thumb and praised generously. Hey. Hearing Li Tian's praise, Yi Yin scratched his head in embarrassment. However, Li Tian changed the subject. The speed of the move is too slow. If you can control any part of your body to glow without thinking, this move will be considered completely perfect. I have to complete it without thinking in a second. Yi Yin's face collapsed in an instant, and he pouted. I just learned this trick, how could I practice it so quickly? Controlling the transparency of the body to refract light, it's really difficult. By the way, Li Tian-chan, don't you have any quick fix? Yi Yin approached Li Tian and grabbed Li Tian's right hand and said coquettishly. There's no quick fix for this, it can only be practiced desperately. Li Tian shrugged his shoulders and said, anyway, there are still 3 weeks before the start of school. If you practice hard before the start of school, you should be able to guarantee that your hands will be activated in an instant. It can only be like this. Yi Yin sighed weakly, then raised his right hand and clenched his fist to cheer himself up, and instantly became full of energy. Before school starts, we must complete this trick. Looking at the energetic Yi Yin, a smile appeared on the corner of Li Tian's mouth. For this invisible girl who was full of vitality during his training, Li Tian also had a lot of good feelings in his heart, at least, every time he trained not even a single person. I have to work hard too. Li Tian moved his body and focused his eyes. The surroundings of his body were instantly wrapped by the speed force, and the golden arc was winding and dancing, and finally dissipated in the air. At this time, Li Tian's figure it has already disappeared in place. On one side, Yi Yin looked at Li Tian who had disappeared, a smile appeared on the corner of her mouth, and she looked into the distance in a blink of an eye. After training with Li Tian for a long time, she also gradually grasped some small tricks to discover Li Tian. For example, now, Yi Yin didn't try to search for Li Tian's figure, but surveyed the overall situation and looked into the distance. At this time, in the peripheral vision of Yi Yin's pupils, a golden thread stretched very, very long. Wait, before school starts, I will definitely be able to master it. Yi Yin used his peripheral vision to pay attention to the golden line that was getting farther and farther away, as if he was talking to himself, and seemed to be cheering himself up, the clenched fist looming in the air indistinctly. On the other side, surrounded by the speed force, Li Tian was speeding at super high speed while thinking. In the speed force mode, Li Tian's brain thought very fast, which also caused Li Tian to like to think in this state. However, now this is not Li Tian's full speed, but just half of it. As for the reason for not letting go of the speed and running at full strength, even the best wear-resistant shoes on the market, under Li Tian's full speed, probably can't last a few minutes of running wildly. And looking for the Heroes Equipment Company for customization, at least you have to wait until Li Tian's Heroes admission notice is in his hands before you are eligible to go to the Equipment Customization Company for customization purchases. Unfortunately, I still can't control the speed force to wrap the shoes together, otherwise the lifting speed will be faster. Li Tian looked at the surrounding scenery that kept passing by, and sighed secretly in his heart. It has been almost half a month since he obtained the speed force. At present, the only way Li Tian knows to increase the speed of the speed force is running, using the speed force to run non-stop. The more you run, the faster your speed force will increase. Also through this, Li Tian guessed that the speed force should be able to become stronger through his running. It's like the super speedsters of the DC universe he knows. Some people simply use the speed force to obtain super speed, but some seem to be Barry Allen, who generate or activate the speed force by running super speed. As for Li Tian, there is no doubt that he is the one who gains super speed boost by running to generate super speed force. After all, Minecraft isn't surrounded by a speed force wall that can provide speed force to speedsters, nor does it have another Barry Allen running to generate speed force. Regarding the speed force, Li Tian has never stopped exploring it. Although the time is short, but through some information and personal experience in previous lives, Li Tian thinks that the speed force should be a magnetic field or a force field. A force field that only covers his whole body, or in other words, a force field that exudes speed force from his whole body. In this force field called speed force, all of Li Tian's speeds will be infinitely accelerated, and it will violate or counter some laws of physics. For example, if you just run barefoot without shoes, Li Tian's feet will not experience the high-intensity wear and tear of shoes, and even if you run at a speed exceeding Mach 2, Li Tian will not feel the air when the sound barrier is broken. That terrible resistance. For example, when running with super speed force, the energy consumed is actually not purely Li Tian's physical strength, otherwise with Li Tian's small physique, it would take 3 seconds at most, no more. In addition, the force field of this speed force will cause a certain distortion to Li Tian's time perception. Originally, the excessively fast nerve reaction speed under the amplified speed force caused Li Tian to be in the so-called bullet time all the time while running. For ordinary people, every second of time is equivalent to the current Li Tian's somatosensory time. 60 seconds. But it is not. How to say? Although Li Tian's speed and various reactions are indeed more than 60 times faster than ordinary people, and that second to Li Tian, whether it is thinking or acting, can indeed feel that more than a minute has passed. Look. But Li Tian's brain and body can feel it very clearly. This is 1 second, not more than a minute. It is also because of this distorted and weird physical time that Li Tian feels like he is running like lightning, instead of everything around him being slowed down by dozens of times, only the feeling of running normally. To sum up, to Li Tian, the speed force is very mysterious, and then the speed force is awesome. Wow, wow, wow. Ha, the sound of waves. Li Tian stopped and looked at the coastline not far away. Before he knew it, he ran from the open space where he trained to the beach. Perhaps because of the rise of the Quarks era, which led to a significant reduction in heavily polluting companies, most of the world's oceans have returned to blue. The sea. Standing on the reef, Li Tian looked at the azure sea, watching the rolling waves and the white waves crashing on the reef. Li Tian couldn't help but calm down a lot. Li Tian looked at the horizon in the distance, and a thoughtful look suddenly appeared in his eyes. He remembered that the Flash could run on the water, and the speedsters were so fast that they could walk on the water as if walking on the ground. If you run on the water, the shoes shouldn't be burned by the friction. Li Tian murmured to himself thoughtfully. Do as soon as you think of it. For Li Tian at present, there is no simpler and straightforward way to get the answer than experimenting himself. Whoosh! The golden arc danced, and Li Tian disappeared from the rocky shore in an instant, rushing towards the vast sea. Well, it's so comfortable. On the surface of the sea, Li Tian quickly passed through, pulling out a glowing white water mark. Running on the water and running on land gave Li Tian a completely different feeling, soft and elastic, which made Li Tian feel light and light when he was speeding fast, very comfortable and at ease. Unknowingly, Li Tian's speed on the sea has reached his current limit speed, which is close to the terrifying speed of twice the speed of sound. Just as he expected, even at the terrifying speed of Mach 2, the shoes on Li Tian's feet still didn't show any abnormality, and neither did the clothes. The high-speed friction of the air is far from reaching the level of fire. But Li Tian had the urge to take off his shoes and run barefoot on the sea. After a while, Li Tian happily ran back to the shore with a big fish aroused by the splash of his high-speed running. It's decided, the training ground will be changed to the seaside from now on. Li Tian is definitely for training, not for seafood. Li Tian in a low voice, well, I have to write it down, and I won't forget to buy a fishing net later. At night, the moon is full of stars. Under the soft moonlight, the endless sea is covered with silver frost and stars are shining. On the coastline, Li Tian launched his super speed force to run at night. 2 weeks have passed since the entrance exam for Xiangying, and the notification letter from Xiangying High School has already arrived at home. Li Tian's first place result is not as expected. However, Li Tian was not as happy as he had imagined. Originally, it was something that could be easily achieved, but his aunt and sister Wei were many times more excited than Li Tian himself. 2. For everyone who wants to be a heroes in Neon, Xiangying High School is a place that is now or has been dreamed of. His aunt and sister Wei are no exception. Because of the grades and quirks, the two of them didn't get into Xiangying, but as parents, they will naturally feel happy because of Li Tian's grades. But compared to those, Li Tian still cares more about his slow-moving or even deadlock development of super speed power. After thinking of the method of training from the sea, Li Tian's speed of improvement has indeed increased a lot, and the learning of fighting and professional running is also progressing gratifyingly. In just 1 week, Li Tian's current speed has been able to go from the original nearly twice the speed of sound reached a steady 2 Mach. But compared to the progress of the training results, the development of Li Tian's moves is extremely slow and difficult to advance. After obtaining the speed force and becoming a speedster, Li Tian tried to develop many moves and tricks in his mind, and then he realized a truth. Sure enough, most of the illusions are unrealistic. Li Tian sighed. In his Phantom, the speed force moves that he can develop roughly include the high vibration ion hand knife and leg knife that vibrates the arms or legs at super high speed, and then kicks at super high speed to emit a knife or a similar to Tempest kick in one piece, and the following the Pegasus Meteor fist that punches at supersonic speed and even the future light speed fist and so on. But without exception, the concubine really can't do it. For Li Tian, the speed force is simply to speed up Li Tian's speed by dozens or even hundreds of times. If it is said that Li Tian's handshaking is 100 times faster than that of a Parkinson's patient, that is an easy task, loose. But if he wants to become a high vibration ion knife, Li Tian said that even if it is 10,000 times faster, he can't do this kind of thing. He is a human being with a mortal body, brother. There is also the Tempest kick. Li Tian kicked tens of hundreds of kicks at a supersonic speed, but God knows how to kick the sword energy. Even with the speed type shaving, Li Tian couldn't figure out how to use it at all. As for Tianma pop boxing, Li Tian can do it, but. Just like punching with super inertial force, before Li Tian can ensure that his fist will not be turned into powder due to the shock force, Li Tian will not use this tactic even if he is killed. Obviously speed force seems to be such an amazing superpower, why in his hands, apart from the basic ability of speed force, such as running fast, he can't even develop a few moves, which makes Li Tian conquer it with his brain. The traveler of the world claims to be a traveler. The gap between reality and illusion. Li Tian sighed. The gap between reality and fantasy, Li Tian has already begun to understand, although he has no clue, but Li Tian also faintly gaps to the mistakes he made. That's why he came out to run at night to relax and prepare for Dongshan. Oh no, is ready to start all over again. Hey, that's, in the state of speed force, Li Tian's dynamic and static strength increases are very large, so he can see the figure on the dark beach in the distance relatively clearly. Green Valley Izuku and All Might. Why do they? Li Tian was a little puzzled before reacting. He came to the beach where Green Valley Izuku trained for 10 months. Besides, the admission letter of Shangying High School was also delivered today, so this is participating in the plot. Li Tian rubbed his chin, chuckled, and suddenly became interested. Is it appropriate to not actively participate in the plot after time traveling? Right. Turning his feet, Li Tian ran towards the two people on the beach. Zombie Big. Before Li Tian finished speaking, he heard All Might. Green Valley Izuku excitedly shouted at the shriveled zombie-like All Might by the sea. Hiss. Li Tian suddenly took a deep breath, stunned by Green Valley Izuku's coquettish manipulation. You know, this place is not empty. Even if Green Valley Izuku did not see Li Tian who suddenly appeared, he should have seen a young couple on the side of the trestle bridge. The same is true for All Might, who was frightened by Izuku's sudden harassing operation and spurted out a mouthful of old blood. All Might. Where, sure enough, the young couple on the trestle not far away heard Izuku's cry from Midori Valley, and turned their heads to look here. All Might is in the neon lights, but they are the idols of the whole people. It's strange not to pay attention at this time. Repeat after him. All Might quickly yelled in a low voice, I got the wrong person. Ah, I recognize the wrong person. Lu Jiyu obviously knew what he had committed, and exaggeratedly shouted. What? It made me look forward to it in vain. The young couple on the trestle bridge heard Lu Gu's shout, and adding that there was no All Might's muscular figure in the past, they said in frustration. Ha, X2. All Might and Green Valley Izuku breathed a sigh of relief at the same time, showing a look of rejoicing. On the other side, the corner of Li Tian's mouth twitched. Are they totally ignoring him? I shouldn't have mistaken the person. That zombie uncle, Li Tian said quietly with resentment. What? All Might and Green Valley Izuku froze at the same time, looking at Li Tian who appeared at one side who didn't know when. Is there anyone else? Green Valley Izuku froze in place for an instant, not knowing what to do. And All Might looked at the cold sweat on Li Tian's head. Compared to Midoriya Izuku who didn't know Li Tian, he knew Li Tian, and he had seen Li Tian's mind that was not at all easy to fool. At this time, Li Tian looked at Green Valley Izuku and All Might who were frozen in place, and felt a little inconceivable. In fact, it's not that he didn't want to expose All Might, but if he intentionally exposes All Might, a bad one may cause All Might's suspicion. Moreover, Li Tian is not very interested in debunking All Might's true identity, it's just something that needs to be known sooner or later. Besides, he has nothing to ask All Might for. Taking the initiative to dismantle it, for Li Tian, it's not delicious at all but rather risky, so after careful consideration, he finally gave up. But this kind of thing that doesn't need to take risks, and is very interesting. Li Tian is very interested. Uncle Zombie, long time no see, Li Tian said to All Might with a smile. Ah, long time no see. All Might responded stiffly, looking at Li Tian's smiling face. The bad premonition in his heart was like ocean waves, wave after wave. He knows All Might. Green Valley Izuku was amazed, although he really wanted to interrupt this seemingly bad conversation, but he couldn't think of a way at all. Although I knew that Uncle was very strong when we met last time, I never thought that you, Uncle, would be All Might. Li Tian couldn't help but lower his voice when he finished speaking. There are other people on the side, how could he make the mistake of Green Valley? Sure enough, it was discovered. X2. Green Valley Izuku and All Might were shocked, and then smiled wryly at the same time. Young Li Tian, since you discovered it, then I won't hide it anymore. That's right, I am All Might. All Might raised his face and spoke in a deep voice. While speaking, his shriveled body still had the muscles swelled rapidly. In an instant, a shriveled old man who was no more than 1.7 meters old turned into a super strong man who was 220 centimeters thick and full of muscles. But Li Tian fell into a daze looking at the scene in front of him. He was not surprised by All Might's change, but was stunned by All Might's sudden operation. Doesn't he remember? Wait, that's All Might. Ah, when did he come? The young couple on one side of the trestle suddenly shouted excitedly towards this side. Oops, Listening to the voice next to his ear, All Might obviously realized how wrong his actions were. Run! All Might yelled, turned around and ran. Green Valley Izuku saw All Might run away, and hurriedly chased after him. In the same place, Li Tian looked at the two people who ran out one after the other, with the old groan in his throat feeling uncomfortable. Sure enough, this inheritance between master and apprentice is predestined. Hollow down pointing triangle. Slightly activating the speed force, Li Tian quickly caught up with the two who had already run away. There was a distance from the beach just now, and then the three stopped. Hoo-hoo, it was so dangerous that I was almost discovered. Green Valley Izuku gasped and said happily. It has already been discovered, I discovered it. Li Tian said softly, did he forget him again? Ah, Green Valley Izuku froze, only then remembered the existence of Li Tian. You need to exercise your body. Green Valley Izuku, Li Tian said quietly. Li Tian and All Might don't care about this distance at all, and Green Valley Izuku will be out of breath after running. You know me. Green Valley Izuku was startled, and looked at Li Tian in surprise. In the Xiangying High School examination, the only student who defeated the number 0 imaginary enemy, and the only student who defeated the number 0 imaginary enemy, how could he not know him? Li Tian said. Ah, this. As soon as this matter was mentioned, Green Valley Izuku was full of fear. He didn't expect the sequelae of the one-for-all outbreak to be so serious. Not to mention his hands and feet were smashed and he was almost thrown to death. Afterwards, he was terrified by the scores for more than 2 weeks. Imagine that Green Valley was covered in cold sweat. Young man Li Tian, I hope you can help me keep the fact that I am All Might a secret. All Might interrupted the communication between the two, and solemnly asked. No problem. Li Tian directly agreed, there is nothing to hesitate about this kind of thing. However, I want to know the whole story. Li Tian stared at All Might and said. Li Tian is very curious, will All Might tell him about One for All, or will he just tell him about his injury just like Green Valley Izuku knew All Might's identity in the first place? Looking at Li Tian's serious gaze, All Might hesitated for a moment, his whole body contracted instantly and returned to its original shape, and began to speak. However, just as Li Tian expected, All Might only told him that he was seriously injured in the battle with the villains and that he was still keeping it a secret. It didn't mention anything about One for All at all. Li Tian stared at All Might and Lvgu Izuku deeply, and didn't speak until the two of them were getting nervous. I know, I will keep this matter a secret. I can keep this matter a secret for you, but, Li Tian said with a smile, there are still 2 weeks before the start of Xiangying High School, and in these 2 weeks, I would like to ask All Might to guide me in developing my nirvana. Quote. Although Li Tian has seen All Might's unreliable teaching ability in anime, but anyway, All Might is also a professional hero who has been active for more than 10 or 20 years, with keen intuition and experience in quirks or superpowers. This is what Li Tian needs. Developing special moves. All Might spat out a mouthful of old blood. He knew when Li Tian quirks was awakened, and it's only been a while before he started to involve in developing special moves. In the blink of an eye, looking at this descendant of myself, he obtained quirks 10 days later than the other party, and as a result, he couldn't even do the most basic use. Forget it if you don't kill me. Haha, I agree. If you have any questions, you can come to me anytime, young Li Tian. Kicking the horrible thoughts out of his mind, All Might responded with a smile. Although All Might agreed, Li Tian should be happy, but Li Tian saw that he was almost sprayed with blood, and unconsciously took 2 steps back to keep a distance from All Might. It was only at this time that Li Tian noticed Green Valley Izuku, who had been keeping a certain distance from All Might. This little brother is not authentic, That. Green Valley Izuku looked at Li Tian's hesitant opening. Call me Li Tian. Li Tian grinned. For Green Valley Izuku, Li Tian still has a good impression and admiration. Although the other party is a little nerd who cries at every turn, is easily shy, likes to mutter, and is submissive to Bakugo, etc., Li Tian still does not change his admiration for him. This is a real man. He is so cruel to himself. Before he has mastered the full coverage of One for All, every time he sees the other party punching, Li Tian will have this feeling. Mr. Li Tian, are you also a candidate for this year's Xiangying High School? Green Valley Izuku asked weakly. The reason why he asked the question was that Li Tian's name seemed inexplicably familiar. Hey, Victoria boy, don't you know? Li Tian boy is the #1 hero entrance exam this time, and like you, he is a super rookie who killed imaginary enemy number 0 in the exam room. All Might was surprised. The results of Xiangyang High School have been ranked for a long time, and the leaderboard has also been announced. As long as the candidates should pay attention to Li Tian at the first time, he thought that with the quirks of Green Valley Izuku, he would record his own at the first time. It's in the notebook. No. 1. Lu Ji Yu Chuju looked surprised. He finally remembered, isn't the name Li Tian the first place that was glimpsed in the video sent by All Might? Well, I'll be a classmate after school starts, please give me your advice in the future. Li Tian smiled and stretched out his right hand. Ah, please give me your advice. Green Valley Izuku hurriedly stretched out his hand in response. In his eyes, who had personally faced the #0 imaginary enemy, Li Tian, who killed the #0 imaginary enemy, was undoubtedly a figure of the boss level. Green Valley, if you want to be a hero, you can't be so flustered. Looking at the flustered Green Valley, Li Tian couldn't help shaking his head and said, heroes needs to be calm at any moment, face everything. I'm sorry. Green Valley Izuku quickly apologized. Greater than person, less than winking face. It's not okay to apologize casually. Li Tian helped his forehead helplessly. I'm sorry. Lu Ji Yu became even more flustered. Li Tian, he had nothing to say. Haha. Looking at the scene in front of him, All Might couldn't help laughing out loud, and then joy turned into sadness, and he spurted out a mouthful of hot blood. Li Tian. Okay, young man Li Tian, what problems did you encounter when you were developing your nirvana? It's impossible for you to propose that kind of condition without encountering any problems. All Might said with a smile. I've seen it 3 times, and once I saw it on the screen. But All Might already has a little understanding of Li Tian's character and behavior. Yeah, Li Tian nodded. Regardless of the presence of Izuku Midoriya, he began to explain. About my quirks, Uncle Zombie, you should also know that super speed, which I call super speed force, can currently increase all my speeds by about 60 times. Li Tian explained lightly. All Might is okay, he has a little understanding of Li Tian's super speed force, but Green Valley Izuku on the side is already dumbfounded. Extreme speed force, increase your own speed by dozens of times, what a strong quirks. Green Valley Izuku was shocked. Quirks, whose speed has been increased by dozens of times, can understand what this means, and also understand the embarrassment of it, based on his vision of collecting various professional heroes and professional heroes' quirks for many years. Oh no, it's scary. Leaving other things aside, the simple speed is increased by 60 times, so as long as I can run at 6 meters per second, wouldn't it properly exceed the speed of sound? Running faster than the sound, what a speed it is. Not to mention that this is just one of the abilities. For Green Valley Izuku's shock, Li Tian could feel a little bit, but he didn't mean to pay attention to it. Instead, he focused on talking to All Might about his speed force ability, and there was no hidden meaning. Of course, this is not because Li Tian believes in All Might, but because Li Tian believes in his speed of progress. How to say, Li Tian feels terrible about his speed of progress. Bah, it's terrifying. Ever since he was able to run with all his strength on the sea, Li Tian's super speed has almost doubled every day. In other words, Li Tian's so-called 60 at this time, no, it should be said to be nearly 70 times the growth rate, and it only takes 2 months to double it. With this speed of progress, Li Tian felt that there was no need to hide his current data. Far away, Li Tian first explained to All Might about his quirks and the things he can and cannot do, and then he briefly talked about the idea of developing his nirvana. After listening to Li Tian's explanation of speed force and his thoughts on the development of nirvana, All Might pondered for a while and then spoke. Well, young Li Tian, your problem is actually that you have confused the idea of developing special attacks. All Might said in a deep voice. As far as most of the professional heroes I know, and when I develop nirvana, the first thing I need to do is to understand what my quirks can do, and what I can't do, and then I can do it divergent thinking to strengthen what you have come across, or use what you can do to make up for what you can't do, instead of being like you. All Might paused, frowned and thought for a while before saying, you seem to have a completed move in your mind, and then you are trying to use your quirks to get closer to that move, which is very strange of. Although we actually have a rough image in our minds before the development of the nirvana is completed, but you seem to have a complete nirvana in your mind before you prepare to develop it. All Might looked at Li Tian as he said that and couldn't help but feel strange, because this kind of thinking of Li Tian couldn't help but remind All Might of those little nerds who are usually addicted to the fantasy of two-dimensional. Am I using the speed force to try my best to get closer to the move from the phantom? Li Tian's eyes were a little dull. Indeed, every one of his brain holes is basically imagined out of thin air based on the many comics in his previous life, but he feels that he has traveled to a fantasy world and obtained the ability of Speed Force. Then with the super speed of the Speed Force, it should be able to do these moves in the same fantasy world, and then start to develop and test. But he didn't take into account that although these moves may exist in some worlds, for the current Li Tian, they are indeed imaginary, and they are imaginary from a high and overlooking angle. It turns out that my mentality has not been corrected until now. Li Tian looked at his hands and muttered to himself, couldn't help laughing at himself, turned around. Li Tian bowed respectfully to All Might and said in a deep voice, "Show taught. I already know what I should do." All Might blinked, and now he understood. He didn't seem to start teaching, just pointed out a simple question. "Ahem, now that you understand, let's start." All Might coughed lightly, his body swelled and recovered instantly, and then said in a deep voice. "Start? Start what?" This time it was Li Tian's turn to be dazed. "Of course it's to start guiding your development of nirvana." All Might grinned, showing his big white teeth. Li Tian looked at the big white teeth gleaming under the moonlight, and fell into silence. After a few seconds, he said quietly, "Didn't you already know it just now?" Forehead. Guided. All Might looked blank. When did he finish his guidance? At this time, even Izuku, who had been watching from the sidelines, looked at Li Tian in a daze, and couldn't help asking, "Mr. Li Tian, when did All Might guide you?" "It's over." Seeing the adorable little expressions of the master and the apprentice, the corners of Li Tian's mouth twitched slightly, and he said angrily, "Hey, what do you think the guidance is? Is it possible to fight non-stop?" Guidance, just wouldn't it be enough to point out my problems and guide myself to realize my mistakes and shortcomings? Yes, makes sense. Green Valley Izuku looked stunned. Quote. Li Tian looked at the dazed LVGU Izuku speechlessly. He was already powerless to complain. At this time, All Might also thought of his instructor, and remembered the training career in the freshman year of high school. Instinctively recalling the unbearable past, All Might's complexion suddenly darkened, his body even began to tremble instinctively, and his whole body was even drenched in cold sweat. With great perseverance, All Might forcibly suppressed this deep memory engraved in his bones, and then slowly heaved a sigh of relief. So guidance doesn't mean being beaten all the time. All Might couldn't help but fell into deep thought. Bang, bang, bang. There was a bang, and there was a bang on the sea surface, and huge water splashes rose into the sky non-stop. On one side, Yi Yin, who was training his own quirks, couldn't help but keep looking sideways at Li Tian, who was sprinting in the sea with only his head exposed and punching constantly. Li Tianzhong has become stronger again. Yi Yin couldn't help but thought. Although she knew about Li Tian's quirks, Li Tian didn't try to hide his speed power at all, but during the previous training, Li Tian didn't show this ability except for the speed that she couldn't see at all. The power of a huge splash from the bottom of the water. She also didn't know very well that Li Tian's quirks didn't actually increase his strength. At this moment, Li Tian's seemingly berserk strength actually all came from the huge inertia of his ultra-fast punching. That is to say, at this time, even if Li Tian hit the water every time he punched, there was still a heavy counter-shock force constantly counter-vibrating Li Tian's arm. "It'll be done right away." In the sea water, Li Tian gave a soft drink in his heart, and threw out a fist, and then a huge water splash rose directly into the sky. "Drink!" Li Tian yelled violently, and the horse gate under his feet suddenly stretched out his feet and stepped forward. The speed force was activated instantly, and at the same time he swung out a fist. Instantly stopped the speed force. Boom! A huge water splash exactly the same as before blasted up to a height of 10 feet in the sea. The water splashed everywhere, and the sea water dripped and ticked on Li Tian's cheeks. Li Tian slowly withdrew his fist, and his protruding footsteps were steady again. And as the speed force subsided, the redness and swelling of Li Tian's withdrawn right arm also recovered quickly, and then instantly. Drink, as before, with a yell, Li Tian's other foot also moved forward, and then the speed force was activated, and the other left arm swung out rapidly, and then also at the peak of the momentum in an instant, Li Tian stopped the speed force that was running. The rapid and huge inertia passed through Li Tian's arm in an instant, pouring into the seawater, and the huge water splash rose into the sky again, but at this time, the previous splash had not completely fallen. In the seawater, Li Tian was repeating this simple step to activate the speed force, punching, and then stop the speed force, retracting the punch and a series of actions. The purpose of activating the speed force at the moment of taking a step is to allow Li Tian to use or exit the extreme speed mode of the speed force more quickly, and the continuous punching is to exercise the body with the resistance of sea water and grasp the power of the speed force at the same time. Timing. After Li Tian's careful consideration, there are not many stories about the Flash and other speedsters that he has seen in his previous life. Li Tian judged from the experience of the Flash Strike Electric Face Man that the speedster did not activate the speed force. The most dangerous time is when entering extreme speed mode. Therefore, it is very necessary to increase the speed at which you can instantly enter extreme speed mode. And the only way for Li Tian to use the speed force to attack at present is to use the huge impact force brought by the speed inertia. But in fact, after entering the extreme speed mode, Li Tian will not have inertia. This is also the reason why the extreme speedists can still make turns and U-turns according to their own will after running several times the speed of sound or even reaching the speed of light. Therefore, if Li Tian wants to use inertia to attack, he can only rely on the inertial attack brought about by the terrifying speed accumulated in the extreme speed mode by exiting the extreme speed mode instantly, and exiting the rapid mode too early may lead to instantaneous air resistance slow down Li Tian's punching speed to remove inertia. Exiting the rapid mode too slowly may cause the fist that originally hit villains to have no strength, and then turn into a scene where villains is pushed out with the fist. So in the same way, it is absolutely necessary to exercise to improve the timing of entering and exiting the extreme speed mode instantly. While throwing punches in seawater, you can use the huge resistance brought by seawater to practice boxing, and it can also greatly avoid Li Tian's injuries caused by high-intensity training at this time, otherwise the training effect of punching in the air would not be effective. However, when practicing boxing against hard objects, Li Tian is prone to serious injuries and delays training. These are the training plan that Li Tian conceived after All Might pointed out his shortcomings a week ago, as well as the development of nirvana. Although the way of training may be relatively simple, and the idea is a bit simple, but Li Tian is not a professional after all, even superpowers have only been in contact for a while, this is already the best training method that Li Tian can think of. And, this is Li Tian's best proof that he started to develop speed force down to earth, isn't it? Although he is still a little dissatisfied with the development of the nirvana, which is the inertial punching move that will cause self-damage, but this is the only attack method that Li Tian can use so far. Sooner or later, my hand will be able to shake into a high-shock particle hand knife, instead of the current massage boxing. With this belief, Li Tian's eyes were firm, and he kept waving his fists one after another. On the other side, Toru Hagakure on the beach looked at Li Tian who was working hard, his invisible eyes were also extremely firm. The center of her outstretched palm changed from the little stars in the sky at night to a small sun that could not be seen directly at the moment of a thought. The dazzling light could almost blind people's eyes, even Yi Yin himself did not dare to let the light radiate wantonly in all directions, but controlled the angle of refraction to hit the front. Looking at the palms that radiated dazzling brilliance, Yi Yin's face was filled with joy. The plan Li Tian made for her was completed before the start of school. She chose a full week in advance, but after completing this project after the development, Li Tian helped her think about new ways to apply moves. Often flashlights, there are flashlights that are constantly flashing, which is disgusting. The flowing water has no shape, the drifting wind can't find a trace, any reasoning. Ahem, time is like flowing water and drifting wind, flowing through the invisible and drifting away without a trace. In the blink of an eye, April is here. April is the season of cherry blossoms, and Xiangying's school season is coming as scheduled. Waking up in the morning, the house is still empty, and the life of the professional heroes is so irregular, which has caused Li Tian's meal expenses to decrease rapidly. After all, Sister Yi was not at home, so Li Tian could only go out to find a cleaner and cheaper restaurant to eat. To be honest, no matter in the previous life or in this life, Li Tian doesn't hate going to school, especially the Xiangying High School, which is an interesting school for cultivating professional heroes. Li Tian doesn't hate it even more. Especially after hearing that the cafeteria of Xiangying High School, Lungrush, is famous for its delicious food, cheap and clean. Li Tian has long been looking forward to the start of the school day. Wiping the saliva that didn't exist at the corners of his mouth, Li Tian brushed his teeth and washed his teeth in high spirits before going out. I don't know about Xiangying's cafeteria. Does it provide breakfast? On the first day of school, because they had gotten along well with Yi Yin a long time ago, even though they were both in Class A, the two of them did not go to school together. Because of waiting for the other party to serve breakfast in the dining room, although Li Tian got up early, by the time he finished breakfast, it was already very close to the time for class. If it was someone else, maybe it would be late, but Li Tian's words. 5 minutes before class time, Li Tian stopped at the gate of Class 1A. Li Tian grinned, arrive on time. Bang! He directly opened the oversized classroom door, swish swish swish, and the students sitting in the classroom cast their gazes one after another. Li Tian glanced around, and sure enough, although he arrived a little earlier than Green Valley Izuku, almost everyone in the classroom had already arrived, leaving only Green Valley Izuku and Uraraka Ochako not in the classroom. However, it may be because there is one more him. In the original book, the shy student who manipulated animals did not know whether he was rejected or assigned to Class B. Li Tian didn't show any shyness in the eyes of the people who focused on him. Instead, he smiled generously and waved his hands. Everyone, good morning. Good morning, classmate. He answered Li Tian's greeting very seriously, and there is no doubt that it is the very useful classmate Ida. Li Tian smiled lightly at Ida and nodded, then walked towards the empty seat beside Yi Yin. Li Tian, you were almost late. Yi Yin looked at Li Tian and said with a smile. No way, Sister Yi went to the Heroes event this morning, and she ate breakfast outside. Li Tian shrugged helplessly. Hearing Li Tian's words, Yi Yin couldn't help laughing. As a childhood sweetheart who has been training with Li Tian for more than a month, Yi Yin has a very clear understanding of Li Tian's appetite at this time. The other quiet classmates next to them looked at the two people who came up and chatted happily, and instantly understood that these two people might have known each other for a long time. And among them, surprisingly, I was admitted to Xiangying High School with my childhood sweetheart. Kaminari Denki looked at Li Tian's profile with envy and hatred. Is this the legendary winner in life? Minoru Mineta, also known as Grape, was still biting a handkerchief that he didn't know where it came from, full of envy. The voices of the two fell almost at the same time, separated by a few desks. The two people who smelled like each other couldn't help but glance at each other. Sparks flew, and they found the same kind in their eyes. Cough cough, they found the same kind of person joy. Let alone Li Tian, who was like a man on his back. Even the other, female, classmates at the side all looked at the two with a look of disgust, revealing their true nature. Li Tian and Yi Yin didn't chat for a while, and there was a conflict in the classroom. Integrity is easy to use. Oh no, the upright and rigid Ida-kun cast a spell on Bakugo, who put his feet on the desk with an arrogant face card, Ida's veteran cadre greeting. And Bakugo activated the magic card, Bakugo Katsuki's cry, with a full face. The two of them were the type who didn't care about other people's gazes. Facing the gazes of the classroom, they even quarreled unconsciously. I'm in the same class as the troublesome people. Green Valley Izuku looked at the two most conspicuous people in the classroom from the door of the classroom. His expression was dull and he instantly became dejected. Immediately afterwards, the two troublesome people in the mouth of Green Valley noticed Green Valley Izuku at the door at the same time. One stared at Green Valley with glaring eyes, and the other rushed forward and started talking to Green Valley in a serious manner. Just after saying a few words, Uraraka Ochako, the last student of Class 1A, also appeared at the door of the classroom, and the three of them chatted at the door of the classroom. But Li Tian paid attention to another person. Li Tian looked through the crack of the door at the figure wrapped in a sleeping bag that rubbed into the camera little by little, that was covered in black lines. Although Li Tian knew that although Aizawa Shota looked decadent, he was actually very decadent, but he was unexpectedly reliable. Not enough, isn't there a more normal teacher as the head teacher? Li Tian couldn't help but rubbed his forehead. Yi Yin at the side was puzzled when he saw Li Tian's gesture, and then followed Li Tian's gaze. Then I saw a large group of yellow caterpillar-like things appearing at the door of the classroom, shrugging and shivering, looking very disgusting. Ah, what is that? Yi Yin exclaimed suddenly. Following Yi Yin's exclamation, the students present quickly raised their eyes and looked over. The nearest three, Lvgu Izuku, Uraraka Ochako, and Ida Ida, were even more startled by the inexplicable thing that suddenly appeared beside them. Jump! The yellow thing turned over and revealed a bearded face, facing the classroom, and said weakly, "If you want to find friends to play with, go somewhere else. This is the heroes department." The unshaven Aizawa Shota glanced at Li Tian in the classroom expressionlessly, then opened the zipper of the sleeping bag, stood up, drank the milk in his hand, and then continued, "It took 8 seconds to quiet, you are very lacking in rationality, but since you can find me, you are considered qualified. I'm Aizawa Shota, the homeroom teacher, please give me your advice." Head teacher. All the students were stunned. Looking at the figure of Aizawa Shota, who was sluggish, almost everyone had doubts in their eyes. They couldn't believe that the person in front of them turned out to be their head teacher. However, as a student, no one questioned it. Ignoring the doubts of a group of students, Aizawa Shota said in a deadpan manner as before, "Soldiers are expensive, everyone change into gym uniforms and come to the playground." After finishing speaking, Aizawa Shota ignored the students' reactions, turned around and walked towards the playground. Everyone looked at Aizawa Shota's back, hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked towards the locker room. The school's map, Xiangyang, had already been distributed to them, and basically every student would keep that map firmly in their hearts early on. Quirks Mastery Test. The people who quickly changed their clothes came to the operation. Unsurprisingly, it was the test in the original plot, and it was also the first step for each student to realize what they could do with quirks. But at this time, most of the people have not reacted. Hearing Aizawa Shota's words, they were surprised and asked about the normal activities such as the school introduction at the opening ceremony. However, Aizawa Shota destroyed the students' longing for normal school activities with a few words, and let Xiangyang's so-called free school spirit initially have a concept in their hearts. "Okay, let's get started." Aizawa Shota turned to face the students. "You should have done it in junior high school. Softball throwing, standing long jump, 50-meter running, endurance running, grip strength, repeated horizontal jumps, supine 8 kinds of physical fitness tests that prohibit quirks from standing up and sitting forward bending. This unreasonable and unchanging test standard that has been used until now is also the negligence of the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology, but it is not the same in Xiangyang." Aizawa Shota said lightly. All the students were taken aback for a moment. "Li Tian, the first place in the practical test is you." Aizawa Shota suddenly looked at Li Tian. "How many meters could you throw a softball in junior high school? Who cares about that kind of thing?" Li Tian shrugged his shoulders and pouted. He really didn't care about his previous achievements. "Teacher, Li Tianjin's junior high school grade is 82 meters. Seeing Aizawa Shota's unfriendly eyes, Yi Yin raised his hand and said, 82 meters. In fact, Yi Yin was thinking too much, because Aizawa Shota's belly is not so small. "Get out, try to use quirks with all your strength, as long as you don't circle the circle, you can play with it," Aizawa Shota said, giving up the seat under his feet to test the softball. "Do you use all your strength?" Li Tian grinned. To be honest, if he had been asked to come 2 weeks ago, he might have really made a fool of himself, but now. Li Tian took a few steps forward and walked into the circle where the softball was thrown. "Is he number 1? I heard that the head of that monster's imaginary enemy number 0 was used as a spinning top to play ruthlessly." Many students present watched Li Tian step forward and began to discuss in a low voice behind. Only Putao and Ojiro Mashirao looked at Li Tian with slightly different eyes. As candidates in the same examination room as Li Tian, they could see the horror scene where the giant robotic head turns into a spinning top. "Is that the guy?" Bakugo Katsuki stared at Li Tian, eyes full of fighting spirit. Li Tian didn't pay much attention to the students' comments. Standing in the circle, Li Tian stared forward with a softball in his hand. Just try your best now, Li Tian thought in his heart, moving his right hand holding the softball back and forth. Crackling, the golden arc danced, covering Li Tian's whole body in an instant. Boom! No one saw Li Tian's actions just now, they just had a blur in front of their eyes, and there was a roar in their ears, and then the softball in Li Tian's hand disappeared. What's going on? What just happened? The students were stunned, but the teacher Aizawa Shota was not. He stared at Li Tian Aizawa Shota with a flicker of eyes, then took a look at the mobile phone in his hand and then raised his hand to show it to the students. If you want to break through the limit, you first need to know where your limit is. This is the purpose of the hero's existence, Aizawa Shota said lightly. 2,352 meters. True or false? What an exaggerated figure. It's too strong. Although a group of her reservists didn't know what happened just now, they were still amazed when they saw this exaggerated number. Worthy of being the first place in the actual test. Yaoyorozu Momo, the young lady who was recommended as a recommended student, also exclaimed. Another recommended student, Shoto Todoroki, also changed his gaze towards Li Tian, staring at Li Tian's figure. 2,352 meters. Li Tian, who had stopped his speed as early as the moment the ball was about to be shot, raised his eyebrows slightly as he looked at the blurry little black shadow in the distance. It seems that the timing of the shot was not grasped well, and the break through the instant of the sound barrier caused a lot of deceleration. Sure enough, such a delicate timing is difficult to grasp, Li Tian said to himself and returned to the student team. You are really strong. You are indeed the number one in the actual test, Hiroshima Eijiro said boldly. It's not bad. My quirks are actually not very good at strength, Li Tian said with a modest smile. Not very good at strength. The corners of the mouths of the few people close to Li Tian twitched, looking at the bright numbers on Aizawa Shota's phone. They almost spit out a mouthful of old blood. This TM is not good at strength. Pretending to be B is not like this. On the other side, Bakugo Katsuki stared at Li Tian, his eyes were burning with fighting spirit, and Shoto Todoroki, his eyes from time to time were also full of fighting spirit. However, Xiangying is still interesting, the exam does not ban quirks. It is indeed the hero's subject of the top middle schools in the country. The students became excited again after chatting, but only Lu Gu's face gradually became panicked. Using the quirks test, for a person like him whose quirks are like disposable items, it will undoubtedly kill him. However, isn't it interesting? Aizawa Shota glanced at the joking students, suddenly grinned, and said sullenly, if this is the case, then the last place in the grade will be regarded as hopeless and expulsion. All right. Fired. The last place. Compared with the laughter just now, when Aizawa Shota said this, all the students were blown away. Even if they had excellent grades, they would not be the last. Their faces changed slightly, and they looked at Aizawa, who didn't seem to be joking, in astonishment. Shota. But isn't today the first day of school? Ashido Mina couldn't help but ask. That's right. Isn't it too hasty to be expelled before a day of school? Yi Yin also echoed. And even if it's not the first day, expulsion would be too unreasonable. Uraraka Ochako also said immediately. Compared with boys, girls are more emotional after all, and they don't agree with this kind of thing more. Aizawa Shota had a gloomy face, lifted his long hair that covered his eyes, and scanned a group of students with his bloodshot eyes. When he looked there, it became quiet. In the end, no student was still making noise. Only then did he grin in a dark voice. Natural disasters, major accidents, villains who don't play their cards according to common sense, and disasters that don't know when they will come. The whole world is now full of such unreasonable things, and overthrowing this unreasonable heroes. If you want to go to a fast food restaurant after school to joke around, then you have come to the wrong place, Xiangying. It is a place that will give you hardships for the next 3 years. Only by going forward with all your strength can you ride the wind and waves. Quote. Besides, I told you before that the school spirit of Xiangying is freedom. It is the freedom of our teachers to treat students as they are. Welcome, this is Heroes Department of Xiangying High School. Aizawa Shota looked at everyone. His eyes are full of oppression belonging to professional heroes. Following the baptism of Aizawa Shota's heavy words, although the students in Class A were still a little uncomfortable, they all calmed down and fell into deep thought. At the same time, everyone's mentality began to change quietly, and they accepted the philosophy. Even Izuku, who is still worried, has no intention of refuting at this moment. In his opinion, Aizawa Shota is right. As for Li Tian, unlike these children who have not established the three views, Li Tian already has a complete three views. Although it is a bit fragmented now, it is not something that Aizawa Shota can change in a few words, although he also thinks that Aizawa Shota what Shota said makes sense. Standing in the crowd, Li Tian looked at Aizawa Shota who was grinning sullenly, and couldn't help showing a hint of playfulness in his eyes. Although he said that he was expelled from the last place, how could Li Tian not see that Aizawa Shota was always on Izuku's body? Of attention. Is it because Green Valley was dissatisfied with Green Valley Izuku who was seriously injured and fell to the ground after using one for all in the previous actual test, and thought that this is not worthy of becoming a hero's? Li Tian couldn't help laughing, although he knew it a long time ago, but it's really interesting to see this kind of arrogant tenderness with my own eyes. The first event, 50 meters run. A small robot stood at the finish line, and a gay electronic voice came, "Everyone is on your mark, get ready." Boom. A shot was fired, and Ida and Asui Suyu at the starting line started to run. 3 seconds 04. 5 seconds 58. One after the other, the little robot at the finish line reported the results of the two. "Are you running 50 meters? In the crowd, Li Tian looked down at the shoes on his feet, with a hint of thought in his eyes. If it's only 50 meters, it should be able to reach 300. Because the assessment order is based on the student number, Li Tian, whose student number is number 8, is the fourth group in the assessment order. Standing at the starting point, Li Tian moved his arms and legs. "On your marks, get ready." Boom. A gunshot followed by 0.16 seconds. The gay voice of the little speed measuring robot rang out. The people present looked at Li Tian, who was standing at the finish line with ethereal spirit, looked at number 7 Kaminari Denki who was stunned in place, and then turned their heads to look at Li Tian, who was surrounded by fairy spirit at the finish line. Except for Yi Yin, Lu Ji Yu, and teacher Aizawa Shota, who knew Li Tian's abilities long ago, these two words popped into the hearts of other students at the same time. It turns out that he's really not good at speed. Kirishima opened his mouth wide, thinking of Li Tian's modest words before. What happened just now? Kaminari Denki stammered, teleportation. The 50 meters runs in 0.16 seconds, and the speed has reached more than 300 meters per second, which is already close to the speed of sound. As a super good student, Yaoyorozu Momo instantly calculated Li Tian's speed just now, but only in this way, she will be even more shocked. Numbers don't lie. This is too perverted. Li Tian still doesn't know that at this moment, his future classmates have unanimously labeled him a pervert, and he is currently busy. Is it still too fast? Li Tian looked at the shoes that started to emit white smoke under his feet, lowered his head helplessly and rubbed on the sand on one side, and wiped out the smoldering flames in the shoes. Sure enough, compared to strength, his quirks is more improved in speed. Aizawa Shota looked at Li Tian and thought in his heart. Although his purpose at this time was to eliminate Izuku, who seemed hopeless to him, as a teacher therefore, we should care about every student. However, it's much slower than the last test. Is it because of the shoes? You should wear special running shoes on the day of the test, right? Aizawa Shota secretly observed the white smoke from the shoes on Li Tian's feet guessed. Although Li Tian's speed caused a commotion, the assessment still had to continue. Kaminari Denki, who was supposed to start with Li Tian, also got a chance to re-examine. Second item, grip strength. Li Tian looked at the power grip in his hand, extremely relaxed. His fingers supported the power grip so as not to let go, and then, the speed force burst out instantly and then cancelled. 952 kilograms. Li Tian looked at the number displayed on the grip in his hand, moved his muscles and slightly pulled his fingers, and shook his head secretly. Sure enough, the acceleration distance is too short to reach this level. The distance between the sensor on the top of the grip is only 2 or 3 centimeters. In such a short distance, the speed force can be instantly activated and cancelled. Li Tian's manipulation of the speed force can be regarded as entering the room. This is also Li Tian's special training. Results. As for being able to instantly increase the speed to the limit in such a short distance and then stop, then Li Tian's manipulation of the speed force can already be called a miracle. Li Tian was not very satisfied with the results, but the others looked at the exaggerated numbers on the grip in Li Tian's hand, and once again confirmed Li Tian's abnormal label. Third event. Standing long jump. 12 meters. Although Li Tian could only use the speed and inertia at the moment of takeoff to accelerate because he couldn't run up and accelerate, it wasn't a bad result. However, in the standing long jump, Bakugo Katsuki, who was suppressed by Li Tian in the previous few events, became fierce and exploded with both palms one after another. Looking at Bakugo, who glared at him provocatively from a distance, Li Tian looked helpless. What he is least good at is dealing with this kind of brat. If you don't want to beat him up, Li Tian said silently. No, if you beat him up, he will get even worse. Fourth item. Repeated horizontal jump. After the explosion of the speed force, this kind of pure speed test is not difficult for Li Tian at all. Fifth item. Softball throwing. Li Tian used the previous results and did not take the test, but just watched other students complete the test. Among them, only because of Quirk's relationship, the infinite Uraraka Ochako throne surpassed Li Tian's result. And Bakugo Katsuki, who is full of desire to win and lose, even if he puts his life to the test, the results he throws are almost the same as in the original book, which is hardly a breakthrough, which makes him look at Li Tian even more eagerly. The scene of Green Valley's self-mutilation also successfully attracted Aizawa Shota's attention, which greatly changed his impression of Green Valley. But, seeing Green Valley holding the index finger with a severely strained muscle and possibly even broken bones several times and talking to Aizawa Shota reluctantly, Li Tian couldn't help but hold his forehead and was speechless. He couldn't help but suspect that quirks from Green Valley won't be super resistant. Bah, it's super painful. And Bakugo, who was still staring at Li Tian at the side, immediately threw Li Tian when Green Valley threw a softball and caused a strong wind, staring at Green Valley in disbelief. This kind of power. Was just an inconspicuous pebble before. Bakugo Katsuki's eyes were wide open, full of annoyance, and the expression on his face changed dramatically. Have you been playing tricks on me, kid? Roaring, Bakugo Katsuki kept exploding his palms, and rushed towards Green Valley with an angry face. Looking at the scene in front of him, Li Tian's eyes lit up slightly, as if he had thought of a good way not to be harassed by Bakugo. Indeed, in the original plot, after Green Valley grew up, Bakugo almost kept entangled with Green Valley instead of Bang. Li Tian secretly thought, it seems that he must properly guide Green Valley to grow up as soon as possible. Bakugo Katsuki, who lost his mind and rushed to the Green Valley, was caught by Aizawa Shota without any doubt, and it was effortless. Just like the commotion caused by Li Tian, the emotional dispute between Bakugo and Green Valley is just a small episode, and the test is still going on. The next, sixth item. Sit-ups. With Li Tian's physical fitness, even if he didn't use the speed force, it would be no problem. As for the seventh item, three-dimensional forward bend in sitting position, the girls with naturally soft bodies took the first few places. Li Tian even got the 10th place with the worst score in all the items. As for the final, eighth event, endurance run, it is just a 3,000-meter long-distance run. Li Tian and Aizawa Shota, who completed the run in less than 20 seconds, said that he can run 5 at a time at this speed. Hours to wait for lunch. All 8 assessments have been completed. Finally, the score statistics will be completed soon. It's a waste of time to read the grades one by one. This is the ranking of all of you. The total score is calculated by adding up the scores of each grade. Aizawa Shota showed the students with the projection function of the mobile phone, before. As expected, the first place was taken by Li Tian, while the second and third places went to Yaoyorozu Momo and Shoto Todoroki, who had submitted their admissions. As recommended students, the strength of these two people in the test convinced all the students in Class A. Yi Yin took a long breath of relief, walked to Li Tian's side, and said with a happy face, the 18th place, fortunately, it's not the last one, otherwise it would be wrong to be fired. My quirks are not suitable for this physical test. I believe it will be absolutely fine. Li Tian encouraged with a chuckle, but in the future, let's also add training to improve your physical fitness. Yeah, Yi Yin nodded in agreement. If she might have been reluctant before, then now, she can't wait to start training immediately. This feeling of being at the end of the crane is too scary. But, Yi Yin turned his head to look at Izuku, who was sluggish in front of the ranking, with sympathy in his eyes. The last place, without a doubt, is Midoriya Izuku. After throwing that softball, it's something to be proud of to be able to endure the pain in your fingers and complete the exam. How can you get good grades? Li Tian looked at Yi Yin's movements and said lightly. Many other students also looked at Green Valley with sympathy in their eyes. Mr. Green Valley. Uraraka Ochako couldn't help but want to step forward to comfort the desperate Midoriya Izuku. Then at this moment, Aizawa Shota, who was about to leave, suddenly remembered something, turned around and looked at the students. By the way, the expulsion was a lie. Everyone stared at Aizawa Shota dumbfounded. Aizawa Shota grinned, showing an expression of successful mischief. This is just a reasonable hypocrisy to draw out your best potential. Ah, the students who didn't know why suddenly screamed. And Lugu, who feels like he has been on a roller coaster, is even more stimulated by the ups and downs. The painting style is different. Have you already started to become a teacher? Li Tian looked at Aizawa Shota, who had always shown himself as a decadent uncle, and showed a mischievous smile, and couldn't help laughing. It was really difficult for him to make such an expression. Ms. Aizawa is so bad, he actually used that kind of lie to deceive people. On the way back to the classroom, Yi Yin couldn't help complaining. Cheat, Mr. Aizawa is not lying. Li Tian said with a light smile. But Mr. Aizawa is clearly lying. Yi Yin puffed up his cheeks and said dissatisfied. It's just a temporary change of mind. Li Tian said with a light smile. From the very beginning of the exam, I noticed that Mr. Aizawa has been staring at Lu Jiyu, and the expulsion quota was probably reserved for Lu Jiyu from the very beginning. It's just that Mr. Aizawa changed his mind in the end. Ms. Aizawa planned to expel Lugu from the very beginning. Why? Yi Yin asked in surprise. It should be seen that Green Valley will be seriously injured after using quirks. After all, there is no way to become a qualified heroes in that state. Instead of letting him waste time in heroes, it is better to simply fire him. As for changing his mind, it should be lost. The performance of Green Valley in softball gave the teacher some hope. Li Tian didn't feel that Aizawa Shota did anything wrong. Sometimes what looks like cruel rejection is actually kindness. As he spoke, the corner of Li Tian's eyes unintentionally glanced at the corner of one side. His words were not just for Yi Yin. Clutching his injured finger, Green Valley Izuku leaned sideways against the wall and came out after hearing the sound of Li Tian and Yi Yin leaving. His tear-stained face was full of fighting spirit. Student Li Tian, these dishes are too much, we can't eat so much. Uraraka Ochako held the plate in his hand, looked at the table full of food, and said weakly. Wasting food is a very shameful act. Ida was also holding the rice in a serious way, and persuaded him in a serious way. Hearing what the two said, Yi Yin couldn't help covering his mouth and laughing lightly. Green Valley couldn't help scratching his head, and said, that Uraraka classmate, Iida classmate, these meals are actually eaten by Li Tian himself. Li Tian's appetite, well, it's very big. Because Li Tian and Lu Jiyu knew each other anyway, and they were not familiar with the other classmates at the beginning of school, so Li Tian and Yi Yin came together with Uraraka, who was eating. It's all. Student Li Tian ate it by himself. How is this possible? At least a dozen strong men can finish these dishes. Uraraka waved and smiled as he looked at the meals piled up on the entire dining table. Ah, Green Valley looked at the corner of Uraraka Ochako's mouth twitching slightly. Wrong, big mistake, let alone a dozen strong men, even if they doubled, they couldn't finish eating. Green Valley thought of the last time All Might invited the two of them to dinner. Li Tian weakly asked if they were full, then waved his hand at All Might, said the word, full, and then. That store did not receive any customers that night. Haha, it's because of quirks, so I said the appetite will be bigger. Li Tian looked at Uraraka and Ida's reaction and explained with a smile. Because of quirks, the appetite will be relatively large. Indeed, I seem to have heard of a thin girl who was less than 10 years old. Every meal can eat 50 people's meals, and then she can last for half a month without eating. Rumors. Iida said thoughtfully. Is this also the case with Li Tian? Almost, Li Tian said with a smile. Pretty much the same. He just eats a meal that can feed 100 people, and then eats 2 or 3 meals a day. So that's how it is. Uraraka also accepted this explanation. After all, it is the era of superpowers, and it is not impossible for any kind of quirks to appear. In a minute, Uraraka and Iida stared blankly at the dining table that was swept away by Li Tian. Student Li Tian, do you also use quirks for meals? Uraraka couldn't help but asked. Is this for exercising quirks? No wonder Li Tian is so strong. Very easy to use. Iida-kun instantly helped Li Tian think of an excuse. However, no, if Li Tian doesn't use quirks when he eats, it will be a waste of time. Yi Yin said with a suppressed smile. So that's because Li Tian has a big appetite. Uraraka and Iida looked at the table full of plates and suddenly realized. Well, almost. Li Tian shrugged his shoulders and didn't explain anything. Anyway, after he finishes eating, these people will probably understand completely. The speed force was activated in an instant. Entering the extreme speed mode, Li Tian quickly cleaned up the empty plates and bowls on the table, and then ran to the dining area again. Lunch rush, have another table. During the meal, Lunch Rush looked at the impressive student who reappeared in front of him, and silently gave a thumbs up. Come right away. Lunch Rush quickly started preparing the food. After Li Tian moved a table of food from him, he has been silently watching Li Tian to avoid wasting food, so he can clearly see the scene that happened before. What every chef likes to see most is undoubtedly the diner who eats all the food he makes, and Li Tian is exactly this kind of diner, and it is a one-time moment for the chef to see enough. A table of rich food was set up. Li Tian quickly swiped the meal card, and then said, I will come again later. Then he used his supernatural speed to take away the food and rearrange the table. On the other side of the dining table, Uraraka and Iida, no, not only the two of them, but also the other students who had been observing Li Tian's table all fell silent. Student Li Tian, even if it's because of quirks, you actually don't need to eat too much. We can eat less every meal, and then eat a few more meals. Rice said silently. Looking at the serious Iida, Li Tian scratched his head helplessly and began to explain, although they are very similar, I am not in the kind of situation where I stock up on food in advance, but I need to consume 100 times the energy of ordinary people every day. Quote. So the appetite is a little bigger. Is this a little bigger? There is something completely different. Hurry up and apologize to the little girl. On the side, Uraraka fell into a frantic complaint. The consumption of ordinary people is 100 times, that is to say. Iida's movements were a little stiff. Well, my appetite is more than 100 times that of ordinary people. Li Tian shrugged and said helplessly. Hearing Li Tian's explanation, Uraraka and Iida subconsciously glanced at the food on the table. Well, there are at most 10 servings, including the previous table, there are still 8 tables left. This simple arithmetic problem was instantly calculated by everyone around. Then, Google. Everyone who could see and hear Li Tian's table was obviously frightened. And Bakugo, who originally planned to overwhelm Li Tian in terms of appetite, looked at the full plate in front of him, and then saw that Li Tian had changed to the second table meal, silently dispelled his stupid thought, and bowed his head, take a sip and start to eat in a gentle manner. Li Tian didn't care about the reactions of the students around him either. He had completely gotten used to this kind of gaze in a month's time. Besides, his physique that only eats but doesn't get fat is envied by others. If this is going out to play, then Li Tian will definitely become the overlord sweeping the snack street, eating tyrant. You must know that there are only 40 students in the entire Heroes class this year, and Li Tian alone ate more than twice the food of all the students in the Heroes class. If in the morning test, Li Tian shocked the entire class with his outstanding results, then at noon, Li Tian shocked all the teachers and students with his terrifying appetite. Famous heroes. As for the fact that the school has been famous, Li Tian only wanted to say other than lamenting the boredom of these preparatory heroes. MMP, Epsilon, #O, dish. And with the end of the morning and noon episodes, in the afternoon, there were no other unreasonable things. Instead, it was like a normal school, distributing new books, posting schedules, and chatting with each other to get to know each other. Just other miscellaneous things. And after finishing all these things, the first day of school passed like this. After all, as freshmen, they haven't joined any clubs yet, and they don't have any activities after school. After saying hello to each other, they go home separately or go home together with those who live closer. As for Li Tian, it was still the same as in the past. Calling Yi Yin, the two of them said hello to their classmates and then walked towards the seaside where they trained before. With Li Tian's super speed, it was very convenient for them to travel. School entrance. 2. Let's go. Okay. Li Tian and Yi Yin talked, and hugged Yi Yin sideways, and Yi Yin didn't twitch but huddled in Li Tian's arms very cooperatively. Lying in Li Tian's arms, listening to the strong and powerful beating heart, even though it has happened many times, Yi Yin still couldn't help but feel his little face get hot. Get ready. Go. Scoff. A golden electric arc flickered behind Li Tian, a handful of dust flew up in place, and Li Tian had disappeared in place. The world of haste. This is a world where everything is extremely slow, as if time stands still. Li Tian is wrapped in super speed force and holding Yi Yin in his arms, galloping in this still world, heading towards their training ground. However, holding Yi Yin in his arms made Li Tian raise his eyebrows involuntarily. This is. Li Tian looked down at Yi Yin, who seemed to be frozen in time, in his arms. His face was full of surprise. He had a feeling that if he wanted to, he could pull Yi Yin into this world of speed force, instead of using speed force to cover Yi Yin's body to offset the rapid inertia and strong wind like now. It's the feeling of pulling Yi Yin into the speed force and becoming a speedster. However, when Li Tian wanted to try to pull Yi Yin in, he felt completely powerless. The super speed force covering Yi Yin's body surface, no matter how Li Tian directs it, it only covers Yi Yin, instead of pulling Yi Yin into the world of speedsters as he felt. The speed is not fast enough. The inexplicable enlightenment in Li Tian's heart, holding Toru Hagakure, makes his running posture not smooth and the speed cannot be improved, which makes his current speed unable to pull others into the world of super speed force come. Moreover, at his current speed, if he runs at full speed, he may not be able to run very far. His and Yi Yin's clothes will be heated due to the intense friction with the air, and then a little spark generated by the shoes will be ignited, completely burning into ashes. Some people may say that friction at a fast speed will directly ignite the clothes, but I feel that the current double speed of sound is far from reaching the point where the friction between the clothes and the air catches fire. The shoes are also running on the ground, and the friction is far greater than that of the air. Too much will cause fire. Of course, I don't have the ability to calculate the specific situation of this kind of complicated thing. If there is a mistake, the world is different and the laws of physics are different. After all, in the world of the second dimension, the author does whatever he wants, ***. But if it's fast enough, that is to say, in the future, can I even give other people the ability of speed force? Li Tian was frightened by his own thoughts. Giving other people the speed force is a simple thing to say, but you must know that the speed force is like a speed amplifier. The better the basic quality, the more amazing the result after amplification. For example, All Might. If Li Tian can temporarily endow All Might with super speed power, then the basic speed of All Might will increase by at least 100 times. I'm afraid that the speed of All Might will soar 100 times the speed of sound in an instant, and it will be even more terrifying. This, even if there are 100 all-for-ones, it may be the situation of a child with one punch. Of course, Li Tian could feel that it was far from enough to give the speed force to others with his current speed, even temporarily giving it was too far away. Therefore, Li Tian can only temporarily yell in his mind. Shaking his head, Li Tian put aside these distracting thoughts, looked at the world where time stood still in front of him, and the golden arc kept jumping behind him, skillfully dodging all the monitoring probes at super fast speed, and swiftly moving towards the destination. On the second day of school, the morning is a very common compulsory general class such as English and mathematics. At noon, I still ate in the lunch rush cafeteria. Then, I come to, very ordinary walk in through the door. Class A, Grade 1, All Might suddenly stepped into the classroom. Compared with the bulky clothes and pants when he met Li Tian Lugu in the past, All Might is wearing the battle clothes when he became a symbol of peace. The costumes similar to the American comics of the Silver Age are incompatible with everything around them, but wearing them on All Might makes people feel reassured and get goosebumps. and in Class A, almost all the students screamed out of excitement. As for why it is almost. Sitting in the seat, Li Tian listened to the sounds one after another in his ears and scanned the surroundings quietly. When he saw that even Shoto Todoroki, who had always been aloof and cold, had excitement in his eyes, and the others kept talking, exclaimed, "Hey, young Victoria, you are so excited that you seem to faint. You are already very familiar with All Might. 2. Don't you not follow stars? Aoyama Yuga, that's All Might, it's a teacher, it's a man, don't blush, don't look so weird." The corner of Li Tian's mouth twitched. He finally understood the status of All Might in this world. As All Might stepped onto the podium, the exclamation in the classroom finally stopped. Even if they were excited, they still remembered that they were students now, and they were students of All Might, so of course they had to show their best side. "The course I'm in charge of is Heroes Basics." On the podium, All Might clenched his fists and supported his back, and said loudly to the students with a big smile, "This is a course for various trainings to build your performance. The Heroes Basic course is undoubtedly the course with the most credits." All Might was talking, and the students below were still excited, but this time the excitement was not because of All Might, but these are combat uniforms made according to the quirks report and requirements submitted by you before admission. Following All Might's words, several walls of technologically styled cabinets protruded from one side of the classroom. It is also the numbered cabinets on the wall that make the enthusiasm of the students directly overwhelm the existence of All Might. Combat training. Bakugo grinned, his eyes full of fighting intent swept over the figures of Li Tian, Hong and Yaoyorozu Wan. These were the people who had been crushing him during the admission quirks test. "Look at me blasting you all to pieces. That's not what heroes said at all, hey." As Bakugo's childhood sweetheart, Green Valley instantly understood what Bakugo meant, and complained speechlessly in his heart. He still doesn't have the guts to blatantly complain about his own ka sauce. "Is this the battle suit made according to my request?" Li Tian stood in front of number 8's box, stroked the box lightly, and then stretched out his hand to open it. To the eye, it looks like a gold and red dress. Li Tian reached out and picked up the simple introduction card on the clothes and looked at it. The introduction card is not fancy, as the name suggests. It just briefly introduces that the clothes are made of some kind of high-temperature and wear-resistant molecular nanomaterials, and the shoes and armor are also made of super wear-resistant special alloys. Alloys do not have a series of reaction problems caused by strong friction. It feels not bad. Li Tian caressed the clothes in his hand. The material felt very smooth. Presumably it should be very comfortable after wearing and will not affect physical activities. "Student Li Tian, let's go to the locker room to change." Kaminari Denki called out to Li Tian at the door. "Coming." At this time, the women's changing room on the other side. "Student Yi Yin, where are your clothes?" A group of female voices stared in shock at the Toru Hagakure, which was empty with only a pair of half-knuckle gloves floating in the air. Yi Yin, who was invisible, couldn't help but blush slightly. Even though she knew she was wearing clothes, she was a little shy to the eyes of her surroundings, which made her think that if she didn't think of using her own hair fibers to make clothes, then if you don't have to. "My hero's costume is actually made of my own hair fibers," Yi Yin quickly explained. She didn't want her classmates to misunderstand. "Made of hair fibers?" Beside, Jiro Kyoka asked in surprise. "Well, because my quirks are transparent, the suit should also be made of transparent materials. Using my own hair is the easiest transparent material to find," Toru Hagakure said. "In the current era, invisible materials are not without, but most of them are not suitable for making clothes, and some materials that are suitable for making clothes are expensive. Even Shangying will reduce most of the cost of heroes' clothing. That is not a material that Toru Hagakure can use. And because the hair fiber is a part of my body by default, wearing it, I can even manipulate my quirks contained in the battle suit." Yi Yin continued. "What a great idea, using hair fibers to make a transparent battle suit. Yi Yin, you are a genius." Yaoyorozu Momo praised generously, and looking at Yi Yin's battle suit, she also had a little bit of an idea. Yi Yin's hair will be considered part of the body quirks by default, so will her creation quirks be the same. But the class is coming soon, and it will take time to confirm this kind of thing. Yaoyorozu Mami can only silently suppress her thoughts in the bottom of her heart. Clothing is also an important part of becoming a hero's. Let me see your absolute awareness as a hero's. Boys and girls. On the beta playground, All Might was standing in front of the passage, waiting for the students of Class A. However, it is said to be a beta playground, but it is actually a simulated town like the one used in the actual entrance examination for Xiangying. In the dark passage, Class A, who had changed into heroes' costumes, had assembled. Wearing the dream costumes designed by themselves, the boys and girls raised their heads and chests with high spirits. As the undisputed number 1, Li Tian took the lead and walked in the front. In fact, he came faster than others. == Li Tian's battle uniform, the inside is similar to a tight-fitting black leather jacket, and the outside is a layered dark red alloy armor covering the entire body. The armor is a light helmet with a streamlined design, which allows Li Tian to temporarily withdraw from extreme speed. Mode can effectively reduce wind resistance and provide Li Tian with a certain degree of protection without restricting Li Tian's movements. The armor on the fist can greatly increase Li Tian's attack power, and can also reduce a certain amount of shock force when punching inertially. The armor on the chest is the symbol of the flash, a golden ring split by thunder. The whole body of armor is divided into this cool golden lightning. The overall attire looks calm and restrained, but still Zhang. For his own hero's costume, Li Tian actually thought carefully for a long time, but in the end he chose the golden red light helmet costume similar to the Flash. After all, when Li Tian ran, he pulled a series of golden arcs. After thinking about it, only gold and red match well. Of course, Li Tian definitely did not make such a decision because these two colors are conspicuous. He is a low-key person. Absolutely not. Following behind Li Tian, the costumes of other students are also the same as those shown in the anime, full of quirks, glaring at Li Tian's Bakugo grenade, Uraraka's futuristic tights, Ida's full-body armor, and Aoyama Yuga's European-style armor, school uniform with half-length ice, Yao Yorizuan's cool clothes, Green Valley's tight sportswear. It seems that something wrong has been mixed in. Looking at a group of students full of energy, All Might grinned. Very well, everyone is very handsome. Then, let's get started. Inseminated eggs. Fertilized eggs. Everyone looked at All Might speechlessly. All Might, who was not conscious of his pet name for the students, continued. Combat training. The full name is indoor combat training, although the repelling villains that you see usually takes place outdoors, but according to statistically, indoors, the probability of villains appearing is undoubtedly higher. Urson, house arrest, underground trading. In this hero's saturated society, the really cunning villains are hiding in the house. So, next you will be very heroes group and villains group, conduct 2-on-2 simulated combat training indoors. Don't you need to do basic training? Aside, Asui Suyu raised his hand and asked. This is the basic training. The foundation of becoming a real heroes. All Might's big white teeth are dazzling. Teacher, how to determine the specific outcome? Yaoyorozu Momo raised his hand and asked. What if I fight directly and hurt my classmates? This is Yi Yin's question. Can you directly beat someone into the air? I knew it was Bakugo's question. My cloak, isn't it handsome? This is a mole who got in. It's not the same as Mr. Aizawa, there are additional conditions. This is a certain Uraraka child who is worried about being expelled. Accidentally careless about that female classmate during the battle, does that count as harassment? This was a classmate of Putao who should leave the group. Excuse me. How will the heroes group and the villains group be divided into groups, and how will the two sides make a choice? This is a greeting from a serious veteran Iida. How strong is that young girl's recovery ability, and how much she can hurt her classmates so that there will be no sequelae? This is a certain classmate who came to join in the fun after watching the fun. Asui, who was the first to ask a question, was like opening a Pandora's box. A series of questions made All Might, a first-time teacher, a little at a loss. He didn't know how to answer, so he answered from there. This is simply more terrifying than fighting a vicious villains for 300 rounds, or being chased by a group of reporters for news. So, All Might turned back and took out the cheat sheet that he had made in advance, completely ignoring a series of questions from the students, and just read it from the script. Listen carefully, the setting is like this, the villains has hidden nuclear weapons in the stronghold in the city, heroes needs to find a way to deal with this matter, and heroes recover the nuclear weapons or capture the villain within the specified time S, and the villains need to hold the nukes or capture the heroes by the allotted time. Is it exactly the setting of American games decades ago? The students complained speechlessly. Completely ignoring the complaints from the students, All Might brought out 2 big boxes with a backhand. As for the grouping of teammates and villains, it will be determined by drawing lots. All the students D. Sean, you said, okay, just now. You definitely said it. I saw in the book review area that there was a story about pulling other people into the Speed Force in the previous chapters, so here is a statement in advance: it is definitely not giving others the Speed Force. It's just a foreshadowing of some abilities that can use the Speed Force on other people or other objects. For example, the rapid recovery ability of the Speed Force, and the ability to pull one's own battle clothes into the Speed Force, so as to prevent the speed from being too fast in the future and not having clothes to wear. Following All Might's quick lottery, the 20 children's shoes from Class A were grouped. Group A, Green Valley Izuku Uraraka Ochako. Group B, Shoto Todoroki Shoji Mezzo. Group C, Toru Hagakure Yaoyorozu Momo. Group D, Bakugo Katsuki Iida Ida. Group E, Kaminari Denki Jiro Kyoka. Group F, Sato Rikido Kirishima Eijiro. Group G, Minoru Mineta Tokiyami Fumikage. Group H, Gen Shuin Li Tien Ojiro Mashirao. The protagonist's full name is finally revealed: Sahua Sahua. Group 1, Asui Suyu Aoyama Yuga. Group J, Ashido Mina Siro Hanta. As for the first group to fight, Group A of the heroes group, Group D of the villains group. All Might announced loudly with 2 balls in his hand. As soon as the words came out. Fortunately, Uraraka and Iida said that the eyes of Bakugo and Green Valley changed at the same time. One eye was burning with anger and full of killing intent, and the other was instantly submissive. You're dead, Chiku. Bakugo turned his head to look at Green Valley Izuku, and his eyes clearly conveyed such a meaning. As soon as Bakugo finished speaking, Green Valley's eyes became firm, and he turned his head to look directly at Bakugo, and they looked at each other. Xiao Shou, I will kill you and let you stay in my heart forever. Xiao Gong, I will not let you succeed. I will use my own way to stay in your heart forever. Li Tian, his eyes were blurred, and he looked at the 2 people in the distance with a deep expression and said quietly. The students next to them were still confused when they heard Li Tian's inexplicable opening, but they followed Li Tian's gaze to look at the menacing Bakugo and the submissive Green Valley and suddenly understood something. PFF'd, Xiaogong Xiaoshou, haha, I can't do it anymore, haha, Li Tian, you are too talented. What happened during the test yesterday let them know that LVGU and Bakugo actually knew each other. Although they didn't know what the relationship between the 2 was, but with Li Tian's little story, the 2 looked at each other. The look of it is undoubtedly. Even All Might couldn't help turning his head to cover his smiling face. I'll kill you. Bakugo's forehead was bulging with veins, and he turned his head and roared at Li Tian in an instant. If the villains group doesn't go to the side of the nuclear bomb 5 minutes before the test starts, the heroes group will win. Bakugo, do you want to lose to Green Valley? Li Tian tilted his head and said with a smile. Bakugo stared at Li Tian, panting heavily. Bakugo. On the side, Iida hastily called out. In the end, the idea of not being able to lose to Green Valley prevailed. He roared angrily and followed Iida into the house. However, Mr. All Might, according to the rules you just said, if you don't stay near the nuclear bomb for 5 minutes, you lose. Yaoyorozu Momo found a blind spot, and asked All Might suspiciously. It seems, I didn't say it. All Might was also doubting his life at this time, his eyes kept scanning the rules on his little book. There is really no such thing. No, I misheard that, I'm so sorry, haha. Li Tian looked at All Might and Yaoyorozu Momo in feigned surprise. Are you a devil? The mouth corners of the children's shoes present twitched at the same time. They can see that this guy is definitely black when cut. You fool, I'm going to kill you. From the window on the 2nd floor, Bakugo, who heard the conversation below, yelled angrily. If Iida hadn't pulled him deadly from behind, he might have jumped out of the window. Student Bakugo, this exam has really started. Li Tian waved at Bakugo and shouted, molesting this firecracker who called him an asshole all day long. Li Tian suddenly felt much happier. Okay, Li Tian, Please stop saying a few words. The exam starts, and the heroes team will sneak in 5 minutes later. Everyone else will go to the monitoring room with me. All Might resolutely did not untangle, announced directly. Monitoring room. The screen on the monitor had already been adjusted to the small building that was used as the venue, and Bakugo and Iida, who were already full of anger, had already come to the side of the nuclear bomb. As for Green Valley and Uraraka, they were chatting at the entrance downstairs. Of course, they may also be discussing the invasion plan. After all, the monitors here only have pictures and no sound. 5 minutes passed quickly. Game start. In an instant, everyone saw the furious Bakugo rushing out of the nuclear bomb room roaring, leaving Iida alone in a daze. Seeing Iida's stunned expression, everyone knew that this was definitely Bakugo's own idea. This is definitely going to find Xiaoshu, Li Tian said quietly. Of course, everyone knew who Li Tian was talking about. Looking at Bakugo's anger in the picture, everyone looked at the picture of Green Valley and silently mourned for him in their hearts. Staring at the scene in the picture, Li Tian's eyes were serious. Although it was a joke before, this is really a fateful duel. Obviously, after joining Li Tian, the combination of most of the classmates is different from before, but Green Valley is still with the Uraraka family, and Bakugo is still against Iida with Green Valley and Uraraka. This scene couldn't help but make Li Tian think a little bit. This is a distortion of human nature after all, bah. Is it possible that there really is a so-called plot in this world, and it is the so-called type where the small trend can be changed and the general trend cannot be changed? Just let me see. The so-called fate. Li Tian stared at the screen on the monitor. However, the subsequent development was indeed completely beyond Li Tian's expectations. When Bakugo went downstairs to search for the heroes duo angrily, it was time to look for Green Valley. Green Valley and Uraraka climbed to the top floor with Uraraka's gravity-free quirks, and then searched from top to bottom. In the first minute of the game, Green Valley and Uraraka found Iida, who was cleaning in an empty room. Looking at the two people at the door, Iida was stunned with a broom in one hand and a dustpan in the other. What does this mean? Green Valley and Uraraka yelled and swarmed up instantly. Green Valley went forward and entangled, hugged big legs Iida, while Uraraka rushed towards the model of the nuclear bomb. In the end, even if Bakugo was quick to make a hole in the ceiling of the second floor, and walked straight to prepare for the rescue, there was no time, and he could only watch Uraraka jump on the nuclear bomb and end the battle. Standing in the monitoring room, Li Tian was a little speechless watching the initial battle that should have been blood-boiling turned into an anticlimax. The other children's shoes were similar. Looking at Bakugo, who was throwing a tantrum in the monitor, everyone was relieved. Facts have proved that Li Tian really thought too much about the plot and the unchangeable general situation. After All Might went out to suppress the explosive Bakugo and escorted him back to the monitoring room. Yaoyorozu Momo's explanation successfully made a group of illiterate people including Li Tian understand what knowledge is power. All Might. Meow meow. Cough cough. All Might coughed lightly. Yaoyorozu Wan girl spoke very well. Continue with the class, and the next battle is Group G Heroes Group C Villains Group. Ah, it turned out to be the Villains Group, who obviously wants to be the heroes. Yi Yin of Group C moved his hands and feet, muttering a little depressed. The Villains Group. What kind of traps should be designed for the environment of the small building? Yaoyorozu Momo on the side has already immersed himself in villains thinking and began to consider the arrangement of the traps. On the other hand, Group G, which is heroes, is at this time. Yaoyorozu Wan's giant. Yaoyorozu Wan's giant. Putao stared at Yaoyorozu Wan's corner of mouth already began to saliva. The shadow of darkness that has become a partner of justice will devour darkness, and the messenger of darkness will judge evil. Tokiyami Fumikage whispered to himself, but his eyes couldn't help but cast a glance at Minoru Mineta in front of him. Isn't this the evil that he should judge? Because of Bakugo's whole opening behavior, Yi Yin and Yaoyorozu Wan from the villains group entered another small building used as an examination room, and 5 minutes passed quickly. Although the surprise attack from the roof of the building by Green Valley was very effective before, it was only used in the previous round, and this time it will definitely be guarded against. Considering this, Tokiyami Fumikage and Minoru Mineta rushed in directly from the entrance, quickly rush up. Sombra, Tokiyami's quirks, is a materialized shadow that resides in Tokiyami's body and can be freely stretched and deformed. It is powerful in medium and long distances. And the next picture on the monitor undoubtedly illustrates this point. 5 minutes into the game, the dense traps that Yaoyorozu Wan had set up were almost swept away by Tokiyami's black shadow, and soon reached the end of the second floor. However, everyone in the monitoring room held their breath, looked at Yaoyorozu Momo hidden in the room at the corner of the corridor on the third floor, and Yi Yin, who had been invisible for a long time, immediately understood that the trap of lore was on the third floor. "It's really easy," Putao said with a relaxed face while holding a grape-shaped sphere on top of his head in one hand. "After we catch Yaoyorozu Wan, should we just eliminate her or fight with each other first?" "Yes, what an annoyance." Looking at Putao's wretched expression, Tokiyami knew that the guy next to him was talking about sparring for a while, which was definitely not a good thing, so he almost didn't control Soi Ying to punch him. If it wasn't for Sombra, he still needed to be vigilant about dismantling the surrounding traps. "I really don't know how that chick set up such an exquisite trap in 5 minutes. Haiying used his own characteristics to dismantle the trap forcefully, while complaining speechlessly. At the corner of the stairs from the second floor to the third floor, because of the obstructed view, this is the place where their vigilance is raised to the highest level. The traps that made Tokiyami and everyone in the monitoring room tingle were dismantled and destroyed by the black shadows. Okay, there are no more traps on the stairs, and there are a lot of traps in the corridor on the third floor, and no one else is there." Sombra returned to Tokiyami's side and reported. "Thanks for your hard work, Somiko." Tokiyami thanked Somiko, thinking about going to the third floor. However, it was at the moment of stepping into the third floor. "It's now." Yaoyorozu Momo rushed out from one side of the room, holding a huge gun in his hand and aiming at Tokiyami and the grapes beside him. "There is an ambush." Tokiyami's face turned aside for a moment, and a black figure appeared directly in front of him and quickly moved forward. "But, the technique of blinding dog's eyes." Yi Yin's crisp voice sounded. A dazzling glare comparable to a police flashbang burst out in front of the two of them instantly, and this dazzling light was not constantly on, but flickering and flashing non-stop. Not good. Tokiyami's complexion changed instantly. What he feared most about his dark shadow was glare. In the next moment, Tokiyami and Minoru Mineta saw nothing but the flickering whiteness. The dense steel wire net tightly wraps Tokiyami and the grapes, and there are quite a lot of ultra-sticky spheres on the grape heads in the net to firmly stick the two together. But, in the monitoring room, everyone looked at the scene in front of them in a daze. They didn't know exactly what happened. Except for Li Tian, who knew Yi Yin well, and closed his eyes at the moment of the light, everyone else was also blinded by the flash. "You really underestimated him." Li Tian shook his head involuntarily as he watched the scene on the surveillance screen. At the moment when Yi Yin's flash caused the opponent's blindness, the only one who reacted was the grapes. Although the counterattack method of constantly removing the super sticky grape-shaped spheres from the head and throwing them out was reversed by Yaoyorozu Momo's net capture gun. But that kind of reaction speed is definitely commendable. Of course, because the monitor in the monitoring room had no sound, Li Tian didn't know that the situation was actually like this. "I haven't touched Yaoyorozu Wan's giant, how can I lose?" Eyes closed, Putao cried and kept taking off the super sticky grape ball from the top of his head and threw it out frantically. Yaoyorozu Momo, fool, die 100 times. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.